Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey into something bleak, cold, and very, very real. This isn't just history, it's survival. Or more often, the lack of it. We're talking about winter. But not the cozy kind with scarves and peppermint lattes. No, we're talking about the kind of winter that crept in like a slow killer. And for the lower class, especially before central heating and public health, this season didn't just test people, it buried them. You probably won't survive this. Not because you're weak, it's just the odds are stacked against you from the moment the first frost hits. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean it. Now where are you tuning in from? What time is it there? I always wonder who's out there. Curled up somewhere in the dark, maybe with a blanket or a pet listening in? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts in late autumn. You're already stretched thin, the harvest was poor, again, and you've been rationing everything from bread to soap. You don't have much margin for error, and now the air has changed. It's got that sharp edge, that dampness that clings to your clothes and makes your joints ache a little more than usual. You notice your fingers stiffening by evening. Your breath fogs up even indoors. There's a scratch in your throat, but you brush it off. You've been through winters before, but you remember them like trauma, not nostalgia. Your house, or house if we're being generous, is already colder inside than the air outside you was just a month ago. The roof leaks, the chimney is cracked, and the wind slips through the gaps in the wood like it has a key. The floorboards are bare, uneven. Your one thin blanket feels more like tissue paper. You've tried plugging the worst of the wall holes with rags, newspapers, even a shirt you've outgrown, but nothing really stops the draft. The first real frost comes overnight. You wake up and the water basin by the bed has frozen solid. Your breath hangs in the air, white and ghostly. You sit up, bones cracking, and your first thought isn't, wow, what a beautiful morning. It's, I hope we have enough fuel to make it through the day. You're out of coal. Again. You go outside, where your breath joins a foggy procession of others doing the same. Everyone's heading to the same few places, maybe a woodpile out in the commons, already picked over, or the local coal merchant where prices have mysteriously doubled overnight. You can't afford it, not really. But what's the alternative? No fire means no warmth. No warmth means your youngest child wheezing herself to sleep again, or not waking up at all. Historically, this was the exact moment that divided people. For the upper class, winter meant fur coats, brandy by the fireplace, and sledding parties. For you, it's a strategic war with nature. And nature is not on your side. Not even close. You feel it more at night. You lie down, muscles aching from work, stomach half full, and the cold starts its slow invasion. It starts in your feet. You wrap them in a scarf. Then your fingers, clenched tight under your arms. The worst part is your nose. It stays cold no matter what. You breathe in sharp, icy air all night long, and even in sleep your body doesn't rest. It braces. There's a quirky old wives' tale people still tell, about how putting a brick in the fire, then wrapping it in cloth and sticking it under your blanket helps keep the bed warm longer. You try it. It works, a little. But there the fire is weak, the brick cools, and the cold wins again. Back in the day, people believed certain foods helped warm the blood. A little nutmeg, ginger if you could afford it, which you can't, or even a dram of gin before bed. You take a sip, just enough to feel it burn down the centre of your chest, not enough to dull the rest of the night. The strangest part is how quickly your world starts to shrink. You don't go out after dark, you start choosing which room to heat, if any at all. You gather in one space, usually the kitchen or a room with the smallest window, and huddle close. Conversation slows, laughter becomes rare, the silence becomes another blanket, just as heavy, just as bothering. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about just how many people in urban areas died each winter during the Industrial Revolution. Not from dramatic weather events, but from the slow grind of cold-related illness, starvation, and exhaustion. The numbers vary, of course, because record-keeping was inconsistent and the poor weren't exactly the priority. But the patterns are undeniable. Mortality always spiked with the frost. Always. It didn't help that heating wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. Without heat, your immune system tanked. That cough, it turns into bronchitis. That fever? Maybe typhus. And suddenly, you're not just cold, you're dying in slow motion with no doctor, no medicine, and definitely no second opinion. But you don't think about all that as you wrap yourself in the last quilt your mother made, now patched and unravelling. You think about how long until the morning, how long until the sun hits the roof, how long until spring, though you know that's a lie you keep telling yourself. Spring doesn't save you. It just delays the inevitable. And the cold, well, the cold always comes early. The winter night sounds alive, not like a howl or a whistle, but more like something trying to claw its way inside, slipping under the doorframe, pressing against the loose window panes, tapping through every tiny crack in the wall like fingers drumming in. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders, though it's already wrapped around you like a second skin. It doesn't matter. The cold is already in the room, it's already in you. Your home wasn't built to survive this, not really. The landlord patched the roof last summer, but you're pretty sure he just stuffed straw under the shingles and called it a day. The walls are thin, mostly uninsulated lath and plaster riddled with gaps. You've stuffed the worst of them with rags, scraps of fabric, even pages torn from old newspapers. You read part of an article about someone's upcoming opera debut as you jam it into a corner by the window. Still, the cold comes. The floorboards creak constantly, not from footsteps but from contracting in the temperature. They twist and buckle slightly underfoot, and every window in the house is a joke. Thin glass, no sealant. When you touch one with your fingers, you leave behind a print on the frost on the inside. That's the part that always gets you. Ice forming inside your own home. Like winter isn't just outside your door, it's made itself a roommate. You've tried a few tricks. Hanging a blanket over the doorframe, lighting a candle in the corner to keep the draft away, placing bowls of hot water on the windowsill. It's mostly ritual at this point. False comfort. The warmth lasts maybe 10 minutes before the cold creeps back, more confident than ever. You've even caught yourself whispering to it sometimes, like it's a ghost. Just give me one good night. Of course, there are people who will say you're being dramatic, that winter's not that bad. But they've never lived through it like this. They've never tried to dry wet socks by body heat alone, or slept in a hat because the heat keeps escaping out of their scalp. They have never woken up with the tip of their nose frozen and their breath hanging in front of them like mist. The upper class, if they think of you at all, assume your problem is laziness or poor budgeting. Meanwhile, they sit behind thick walls of stone and brick by hearths stoked with split logs and coal, drinking mulled wine. They write long letters about the beauty of the snow, how peaceful it is, how the flakes shimmer like silver in the moonlight. You know how snow looks from where you are, like a warning, because more snow means more cold, more weight on the roof, more blocked paths, more isolation. And let's not forget what snow really hides: rot, filth, waste, and sometimes the body of someone who didn't make it home. Some people try to burn furniture, chairs, stools, even the doors if it comes to that. You've known families who tossed broken bed frames into the fire just to stay warm another few hours. The problem is, once it's gone, it's gone. You sit on the floor and tell yourself it's fine. You don't need a chair. What you need is heat. What you need is to not die. There's this strange moment every winter when you stop thinking of your house as a shelter and start seeing it as a sieve. The very thing that's supposed to protect you is slowly letting you freeze to death. You start imagining how you'd redesign it if you had the money. You'd insulate the walls, seal the windows, maybe even add a little stove, a thick rug, a real mattress. But that's fantasy. Right now, your world is a constant battle between you and the cold's winning by points. Historically, many lower-class homes lacked chimneys altogether, or had one so poorly designed they let more cold in than heat out. In some regions, families dug pits in the floor to light small fires, carefully so they didn't die from the smoke. Others leaned into what was called shared body warmth. Yes, the classic pile of humans under one blanket method. Children, siblings, grandparents, everyone huddled together in a single room, not for love, but for survival. You're reminded of a story an old neighbour once told. She said her grandmother used to rub her hands with snow every morning before going outside so the shock of cold wouldn't feel as bad. You tried it once. It just made your fingers go numb faster. Still, you appreciated the logic, and in a world like this, you do what you can to trick your body into cooperating, into surviving. There's actually some academic disagreement about just how bad lower-class housing really was during the harshest European winters of the 18th and 19th centuries. Some argue that moral decay was a bigger issue than insulation. Others point to labour movements and early tenant protests, citing structural neglect and greed as the root causes. Either way, the facts don't need much interpretation when your bed is covered in frost and your Fingers have gone stiff before breakfast. You look up at the ceiling. There's a faint drip, some melting snow leaking through the roof where the thatch gave way. It'll refreeze by morning, you know that. You put a bowl beneath it and try not to think about what's growing in the ceiling. There's no such thing as dry in here. The walls are always slightly damp, your blankets too. You live in a chilled fog that clings to your clothes and creeps into your joints. Tonight, you lie back down and try not to breathe too deeply. The air's too sharp. You can feel it in your chest like broken glass. You close your eyes and count slowly, trying to distract yourself. Not from the cold, you gave up on that. No, what you're really trying to forget is the feeling of being slowly buried in it. And tomorrow, it's only going to get colder. There's an art to making a fire when you can't afford one. Not just the fire itself, that's a whole saga, but the decision whether to even light one at all. You wake up this morning, numb from the neck down, and sit by the cold hearth with a single match in hand. Just one. There's a bit of old newspaper left and a few splinters of dry wood you scavenged from an alley 2 days ago. That's it. One small blaze, maybe 10 minutes of heat, and then nothing. If you use it now, the room will warm slightly, but the fuel will be gone. If you wait, you'll suffer all day, teeth chattering, lips turning blue, just to have a moment of comfort after sundown. That is, assuming you're still here by then, so you sit in silence, staring at the empty fireplace like it owes you an answer. It doesn't blink. Your stomach growls. The cold makes you hungrier, but food's already low, and cooking, well, that also requires fire. This is the game winter plays with you. You're always trading one basic need for another. Warmth or food, light or air, water or movement. In a world where fire costs either money or labour, each spark has to earn its place. Once upon a time, you used to think of fire as romantic, something beautiful, primal, even bare magical. Now it's just expensive. You finally light it. You can't help it. Your hands are stiff and raw, and you feel like you're shaking apart at the seams. The flames catch for a moment. Low, flickering, beautiful. You stretch your fingers toward it. That sudden warmth makes you wince like sunlight after days underground. You want to cry from the relief, but you're too tired for that. The warmth reaches your bones like an old friend who's come too late. The problem is, it doesn't last. Within 15 minutes, the fire sputters and dies. The wood hisses, burns down into embers, and you're left with just the ghost of warmth. The room cools again like it's reclaiming its territory. You sit back, defeated. It's not just the loss of heat, it's the loss of hope. You gave in, you wasted your one shot, and now you have nothing to show for it but smoke stains on the wall and a few extra degrees that have already vanished. Historically, the poorest households often relied on peat, dried dung, or even bundles of twigs for heat. Coal was a luxury, even when it blackened the sky. And in many tenements, the hearth wasn't even a real fireplace, just a pit or a metal pan meant to hold burning coals. Imagine trying to heat an entire room with a pan full of ash. That was reality for thousands. There's a strange detail you once read about chimney sweeps, how the youngest were often orphans, small enough to crawl through soot-blackened flues. Kids as young as 5, suffocating in darkness just so the wealthy could have a proper fire. That irony doesn't escape you now, sitting here in your freezing room with no chimney worth sweeping. Meanwhile, just a few streets over, the upper crust are having roaring fires in every room. They toss in whole logs like they grow on trees, which, to be fair, they do, on land they own. Their houses are so warm that they open windows to let in fresh air. Can you imagine letting in cold on purpose? The very thought makes you laugh, though there's no humour in it. If you're lucky, you might find a public bathhouse still running. For a coin, you can steam yourself warm for 20 glorious minutes. But today, even the thought of leaving the house makes your chest tighten. It's too cold and your boots have holes. You tried stuffing them with cloth, but now they just feel like soggy bricks tied to your feet. So you sit still, rationing movement, trying not to burn more calories than you can replace. Outside, the sky is grey and wet-looking, the kind of light that doesn't warm anything. The smoke from the city's chimneys hangs low, choking the streets in a quiet, sickly haze. There's a certain smell to it, burned coal, frozen sewage, and desperation. You've learned to breathe shallowly. And now, you think of dinner. The word's a stretch. You've got a bit of stale bread, half of a potato, and a spoonful of something that might be grease or might be broth. You mix it with water and heat it over a candle, scraping every drop with your finger when it's gone. It tastes like boiled sadness, but it's warm. And right now, that's enough. What's wild is that in some places, especially in 19th century London or Paris, Whole industries sprang up just to serve the warmth gap. Penny fires where you could stand around a public blaze for a coin, or tea shops that sold you more access to heat than actual tea. There were even warming houses where the poor could rent a spot on a bench for a few hours, crowded elbow to elbow with strangers, not for sleep, but just to not die. And here's the debate that still stirs some scholars, whether these services help the poor or simply prolong the suffering. Was it better to get a few hours of relief and then be thrown back into the cold? Or was the fleeting comfort just another way to make you keep going, one miserable day at a time? You lean back against the wall, it's cold through your shirt, you wrap your arms around your knees and bury your face, not to cry, but to trap your own breath and steal the heat. That's your fire now, your lungs, your body. Doing what it can to pretend this is normal. You look at the hearth again, the ashes are dead, the smoke has cleared, and you're already colder than you were before you lit it. So the real art isn't in building a fire, it's in deciding when to give up on one. By midwinter, the food situation has gone from tight to desperate. You've counted every crust, every potato eye, every spoonful of oats like they were coins. Now even those have run dry. You're not starving yet, but you can feel it coming. Hunger scratches at the edges of your thoughts like a stray dog, always there, always growling. You try to ignore it, but it's relentless. It gnaws through your concentration, your energy, and eventually your dignity. The markets, once bustling with noise and steam, are eerily quiet now. Fewer stalls, fewer people. The vendors that remain don't shout prices anymore. They just stand half-frozen behind wooden carts, watching you with the same empty expression you wear in the mirror. There's nothing romantic about these markets anymore. They smell of frost and rot, overripe cabbages, wilted greens, and the sharp stink of spoiled meat covered in a dusting of ice to make it look fresh. You walk through the rows slowly, your fingers numb inside your pockets. You pass a stall with 2 carrots and half a turnip. The seller is burning newspaper in a tin to keep warm, eyes glazed. You lock eyes for a moment. You both know neither of you can afford what's on the table. Somewhere down the block there's a breadline. You can see it snaking around the church steps, shadows of people swaying in the cold, some with kids clinging to their legs. You take your place at the back because there's nowhere else to be. The queue moves slow, agonizingly slow. Someone near the front coughs, a wet wheezing sound that no one acknowledges. No one wants to think about what it means. You shuffle forward in half-inch increments. Every now and then you hear someone mutter under their breath something about how the bread is smaller this week, or how the church's flour must have come in late. A few people leave the line altogether, deciding hunger is better than humiliation. You two stay. You always stay. It's an odd kind of solidarity, this line. You don't talk to each other, not really, but there's a quiet understanding. Everyone here is trying to make it just one more day. No one's here because they want to be. You're here because winter doesn't care if you've worked hard or prayed hard or loved anyone. It just wants your heat. By the time you reach the front, your lips are blue and your knees feel like they've been packed in snow. A woman with red hands and a ladle gives you a chunk of bread. It's warm, but barely. You thank her anyway, though she doesn't look up. She's just as cold and tired as the rest of you. You sit on the church steps and eat slowly, savouring each bite like it's some luxurious meal. But your body doesn't care about the moment. It just wants fuel. The bread disappears too quickly. You lick the crumbs from your fingers, then tuck your hands back into your coat to keep what little warmth you've gained. Historically, these types of scenes played out all across Europe and North America during the worst winters. During the Irish potato famine, during post-war slumps, during the Great Depression, anytime the lower classes lost access to food, winter made it infinitely worse. A summer hunger is miserable, a winter hunger is fatal. You've heard rumours that some people in the nicer neighbourhoods are throwing away bones with meat still on them. You've even thought about picking through trash heaps once or twice. You haven't done it yet. You tell yourself you still have standards, but every day chips a little more off that definition. You're not proud. You're just not starving enough. Yet. Quirky fact. There's an old superstition in some rural parts of Eastern Europe that if you bake bread with your bare hands in winter, the spirits of the cold will come into your home through the dough. So people used long wooden paddles instead, never touching the flour directly. You don't believe in that, obviously. But sometimes, when the wind howls down the alleyways like a screaming thing, you wonder if maybe they were onto something. And then there's the matter of meat. Ha! Meat. That word feels like a joke now. You can't remember the last time you tasted anything that once had a heartbeat. Maybe there's a scrap in that soup from 3 days ago, though more likely it was just a thick piece of onion skin you pretended was meat. The illusion helped. A little. You've started to do strange things with food. Little rituals. You nibble the crust first, saving the soft centre for last. You eat slowly, eyes closed, pretending you're full. You drink more water, even when it's nearly frozen, just to feel something in your belly. You tell yourself stories about feasts you once had, or imagine the meals you'll eat in the spring. They help. For about 5 minutes, there's ongoing scholarly debate about the actual caloric intake of the working poor during harsh winters in the 18th and 19th centuries. Some historians argue they survived on less than 1,000 calories a day. Others claim that creative substitutions kept people alive longer than expected. Things like boiled nettles, bark bread, and rat stew. But nobody denies that malnutrition was rampant, and winter accelerated it like a boot on your neck. You stand up from the church steps and feel the dizziness return. It's not sickness. Not yet. Just hunger and cold, two old friends who've learned to dance together inside your head. You walk slowly, carefully. You can't afford to fall and injure yourself. A broken bone in this weather is a death sentence all its own. Back home, you sit on the floor near the dead hearth. Holding your stomach like that might somehow make the pang stop. There's nothing left to eat. You sip water from a cracked mug and try to think about anything else. Outside, the snow has started falling again. Big, lazy flakes drift past your window, silent and unfeeling. Somewhere in the distance, you hear laughter. Real laughter. Probably from one of the big houses up the hill. They're eating roast and drinking wine, telling stories in front of fires big enough to burn a week's worth of your furniture. You lie back and close your eyes. You pretend you're full. You wake up and your fingers don't move right. It's not just stiffness anymore. It's something deeper, colder, more sinister. The kind of numb that whispers, "This might be permanent." You sit up slowly, blinking against the pale morning light trickling through the frost-covered window. You try to rub warmth back into your hands, but the feeling's distant, like trying to remember someone's face you haven't seen in years. Your boots are by the door, still wet from yesterday. You didn't have the fuel to dry them, so the leather froze overnight, curling like old leaves. When you try to shove your foot in, it resists, solid as stone. You end up wrapping your feet in rags and newspaper instead, then sliding them into the boots anyway, flinching as the frozen lining presses against your skin. You'll walk carefully today, you always do. Out on the street, the frost has turned the cobblestones slick. You move with a shuffle step, like an old soul in a younger body, every movement deliberate. You pass other people doing the same. No one talks. No one smiles. The cold has become the shared language of the poor, tight-lipped, teeth clenched. Eyes downcast. You're heading toward the factory, or the yard, or the docks, wherever they might still need a body. Work's scarce now, fewer orders, slower output, tighter ledgers. The bosses don't say it, but you see it in their eyes. Come back in spring. If you make it that far. Your breath comes out in ragged puffs. The wind cuts through your coat like it's made of lace. You hold your hands inside your sleeves, but it doesn't help much. You keep moving because standing still is worse. Standing still means your blood slows down, and when it does, your fingers start turning colours. You've seen it happen. Chilblains, frostbites, skin going waxy white, then blue, then black. One man at the docks lost 3 fingers last winter. Just gone. He wrapped them up in cloth and kept working for an hour before anyone noticed. Said he couldn't afford to stop. You understood. You still do. By the time you reach the factory gate, you're shivering so hard your teeth ache. There's already a small crowd gathered. All of you waiting for the foreman to come out and pick who gets a shift. He steps out, barely glances around, then points. 3 men, not you. The rest of you start to scatter like rats. No work today. Again. You think about staying to beg or maybe offering to sweep, fix something, anything. But you know it wouldn't help. There are 10 people behind you with the same idea, and none of them are getting picked either. So you turn and walk away, stomach empty, fingers colder than they were before. Some historians argue that the real killer during winter wasn't the temperature, but the loss of labour. The moment cold came, everything slowed down. Trading, building, shipping, farming. If you were poor, that meant fewer chances to earn anything at all. And without income, you couldn't buy heat or food. You didn't starve in summer, you starved in January. There's an old saying in your neighbourhood, cold work pays nothing. Meaning the jobs that exist in winter are the worst ones, hauling coal sacks, breaking ice in the canals, digging out snow with your bare hands. They pay pennies, but sometimes pennies are the difference between firewood and frozen death. Today there's nothing. You end up near the back of a bakery, hoping to scavenge stale crumbs or find a kind worker who will toss you the crusts. There's a bin with burnt bread ends, probably meant for pigs. You take one anyway and chew it slowly. Careful of your cracked lips and sore teeth. The crust rips your gums a little. You don't care. Your gloves, if you can even call them that, are fingerless wool with more hole than knit. You can barely hold anything. You try to warm your hands with your breath, but the wind steals it before it does any good. You jam them into your coat and walk on, feeling each fingertip tingle, then burn, then go frighteningly numb. There's an ongoing debate among medical historians about how much damage a single winter could do to the average working-class body. Some argue that the repeated exposure to sub-zero temperatures caused long-term nerve damage and circulatory issues. Others say people got used to it. But you're not sure anyone ever gets used to the cold slowly killing parts of you. You stop for a moment beside a metal railing and press your fingers against it just to feel something. You don't, not right away. Then suddenly the pain kicks in, sharp, like tiny needles stabbing through your skin. You pull back, but the damage is already done. Your hand aches now, but at least it's alive. You find a spot in an alley that's out of the wind and sit there for a while. You're not the only one. There's a kid further down, curled into himself, eyes closed. Is he sleeping? You can't tell, you don't check. You're afraid of the answer. You think about going home, but what's the point? It's just as cold there, maybe colder. The fire's gone, the food's gone, and the blankets can only do so much, but you go anyway. Because winter strips away choices until going back to the cold is the only thing you can afford to do inside. Your feet throb as the rags begin to thaw. It's the worst part, the thaw. That's when you feel the damage. Like the nerves are waking up just to scream at you. You bite down on a sleeve to stop from crying out. You don't want to wake anyone. Not that there's anyone left awake. It's a strange thought. But you wonder how many fingers you could lose before they stop letting you work. 3, 5, 10? You hope it doesn't come to that. But you've stopped ruling things out. You've stopped believing anything is beneath winter. Because now you understand it doesn't take much. A wet boot, a frozen railing, one too many days without gloves. And that's how it starts. Not with a scream, but with a numb finger that never warms back up. It starts with a sting. You're buttoning up your coat, what's left of it, when you notice the raw patches on your fingers. They're red, swollen, and the skin is beginning to split around the knuckles. You flex your hand and wince. The tips feel hot, like they've been scalded, and yet you know they're cold. That's the twisted magic of chilblains. Your body trying to warm itself too fast and failing, punishing you for surviving. You pull your sleeves down over your hands and head out anyway. What else are you supposed to do? Stay inside and stare at the walls while your stomach eats itself? The wind hits you like a slap, and the cracked skin on your lips starts bleeding again. You lick the blood away out of habit. There's a faint metallic tang to it, almost a flavour now. You make your way down the same worn path to the same overcrowded street, hoping that maybe, just maybe, today someone needs help hauling crates or clearing ice or delivering something too heavy or too far for one person. You scan the usual spots, eyes darting between groups of men like a desperate gambler watching the cards. But there's nothing, just the usual shrug and headshake. The jobs are fewer now, and the men are hungrier. No one's hiring someone with hands that look like yours. They want strong backs and good fingers. You shove your useless hands deeper into your pockets and move on. The pain is constant now, dull when you don't move, sharp when you do. One of your toes has started to go a strange shade of greyish purple. You don't want to look at it too long. You've started walking with a limp, trying to hide it. But limps make people notice you. And in this world, being noticed isn't always a good thing. There's a boy, maybe 12, sitting on the curb near the ironworks, teeth chattering so violently it sounds like he's trying to chew through his own jaw. His socks are wet. Oh, shoes. You stop, hesitating. You think about offering him the corner of your scarf, threadbare as it is, but he's already gone by the time you work up the courage. Just walked off, or faded. Hard to say. Back in the Curthing day, people called winter the poor man's plague. It didn't come with boils or blood, but it left the same trail of bodies. Lower-class workers were often forced to labour through frostbite, hypothermia, and pneumonia with no treatment, no rest, no help. They were expected to keep moving even as their extremities turned black and useless. There are records of entire families losing fingers, toes, even feet across just a few months. You reach the corner where the apothecary sits, its windows fogged from within. You stand there a while, staring in. It looks warm. You can see bottles lined up on the shelves, glowing amber in the light. Inside, the chemist moves slowly in his white coat. You wonder what that coat must feel like. Heavy, soft, clean? You think about going in, just to warm your hands near the counter. Maybe ask for the ointment. You know he won't give you anything unless you can pay, but maybe he'll take pity. Maybe he'll see your fingers and see a human instead of a burden. You open the door. The heat hits you like a wave. Your eyes water instantly, the warmth is overwhelming, and your whole body tenses in confusion. It almost hurts. The chemist doesn't look up right away. You take a step forward, eyes on the wood stove in the back corner. "What do you need?" he says flatly. You hold up your hand without speaking, just the hand, red, raw, trembling. He walks over, gives it a quick glance, then sighs. "Chilblains, possibly frostbite," he says. "Nothing I can give you without coin. You'd need a salve, oil-based, not cheap." You nodded, knowing this was a mistake. He watches you another second, then softens. "Soak it in warm, not hot, water. Wrap it in something dry. That's the best you'll do." You nod again. "Thank you," you whisper. "Don't linger," he adds, already turning away, so you don't. You step back out into the cold and the world slams shut again. That advice, at least, was real. Historical treatments for frostbite were hit or miss back then. Some swore by rubbing snow on the skin to wake it up, which probably did more harm than good. Others believed in brandy, or applying animal fat or praying. You've tried the praying, not sure it helps, your hands are aching again, but you've learned to ignore them. You walk past the chapel where the soup line is even longer today. No soup left, probably, just bodies pretending there might be. You pass by the alley where that boy was. He's not there now, just an empty bottle and some slushy footprints. The sun is going down already. That's the worst part of winter, the days that end before they've even started. You swear the sky was grey just 5 minutes ago, and now it's sliding into darkness. And you know what that means. Nights are worse. The cold isn't just stronger, it's bolder. It creeps into your bones, yes, but also your thoughts. It makes you question every decision, every moment, every flicker of hope. You start thinking about warm baths you'll never have again, about thick socks, about holding someone's hand without flinching from the pain, about all the little luxuries that used to be so invisible. There's an ongoing academic argument, whether winter itself is a killer or just an amplifier. Does it really cause death, or just speed up what poverty already starts? Is it the season or the system? You don't need a textbook to know the answer. You live it. Back home, you sit near the window with your injured hand tucked beneath your arm. You flex your fingers every now and then, just to be sure they're still there. You're not even trying to get warm anymore. You're just trying not to fall apart. And that's the thing, isn't it? Winter doesn't always kill you outright. Sometimes it just takes you one piece at a time. You start noticing the sun disappears earlier every day. Not that it gives off much warmth when it is up. It's just a pale coin in the sky now, flickering weakly above the rooftops before slipping away like it's tired of trying. Which, honestly, same. By late afternoon, the city starts glowing in shades of grey and blue, and a kind of hush falls over everything. The cold dampened sound. Footsteps are quieter. Carts roll slower. Even the stray dogs stop barking. It's like winter is muting the world, one frozen breath at a time. That silence doesn't help when night falls, though. That's when the real loneliness creeps in. Not just because it's dark, but because there's no way to hide from how little you have. And when you're poor in winter, light is a luxury. Most nights you don't even bother lighting a candle. You can't afford wax. And oil is just a memory at this point. Instead, you sit in the dark, staring at shadows on the walls, listening to the house groan around you as the beams contract in the cold. People talk about the cold like it's the main problem. It's not. The dark is worse. Cold steals your feeling, sure, but the dark steals your mind. You tried saving your last candle for emergencies, but every night starts to feel like one. You light it anyway. A tiny flame in a big room. The light flickers and dances, casting long, moving shadows across the walls. For a few minutes it makes you feel almost human. You pretend you're at a dinner table, maybe at a tavern, maybe reading a book. The warmth of the fantasy lasts just a moment. Then the wick sputters, the wax gives way, and the flame dies with a whisper. And now it's darker than before. Back in the day, families used to crowd around a hearth not just for heat, but because it was the only source of light. Candles were expensive. Oil lamps even more so. Poorer households rationed both like gold. That's why so many bedtime stories were born in winter, because when the sun went down and there was nothing to see, there was still the voice of someone next to you, telling a tale to hold off the dark. But when you live alone, or when everyone else is too tired to speak, there's no story, only silence. You stumble through your space, bumping into furniture, trying not to curse too loudly. Swearing somehow makes the darkness feel even heavier, like it's listening. You stub your toe on a chair and bite your lip to stop from yelling. You're not sure if your lip's bleeding or just cracked open again. Either way, it tastes the same. Eventually you find the bed, or the pile of rags you call one. You crawl in and pull the blanket tight, curling your body into the smallest shape possible. It's easier to warm yourself when you take up less space. You learnt that trick early on, and tonight you press your hands to your stomach and try not to think about how long's until sunrise. Here's something weird. Historically, it wasn't unusual for people to sleep in shifts during winter. Not for work, but for warmth. They'd sleep a few hours, wake up shivering, then sit around the embers of the fire before going back to bed. Some called it first sleep and second sleep, a natural reaction to the cold and darkness. It wasn't peaceful, it was survival in intervals. You try to drift off, but your thoughts start spinning. You remember someone once saying that the dark is when the poor do their best thinking because there's nothing left to do but think. You wish they were wrong. Your mind begins pulling things up from the bottom of the river. Regrets, memories, hunger, cold, worry. It's like your brain decided now was the perfect time to throw a parade of everything you're trying not to feel. Then there's the paranoia. You think you hear something outside, maybe footsteps, maybe just the wind, but your heart jumps anyway. You live in a neighborhood where locked doors don't mean much. Desperation makes thieves, and winter makes lots of desperation. You lie still, holding your breath, listening. Nothing. Probably just the roof creaking again. Or maybe someone really is out there, listening back. You miss light. Not just candles or firelight, but real touch, steady light. Something that pushes back the dark without flickering. You remember the way sunlight used to fall across your bed in summer, warm and golden and careless. Now your windows are covered in frost, and even the moon looks colder than usual. There's a fringe theory, one of those off-the-books historical things, that claims entire villages used to go near feral during deep winter. Not in the wolfman sense, but in terms of mental state. Too much cold, too much darkness, too much waiting for things to get better. Some accounts mention people babbling to themselves for hours or staring at candles like they were gods. Whether it's true or not, you get it. You feel your own grip slipping a little sometimes. Not dramatically, just the little things. You start forgetting how long it's been since you spoke to someone. You wake up not remembering what day it is. You stare at your hands longer than you should, watching your breath fog around them. You start asking yourself questions in the dark just to hear a voice. How long until the candle runs out? How long until you can't afford another? How long until you can't afford you anymore? You try humming. It helps a bit. The tune is off-key and slow, and you can't even remember what song it is, but the sound fills the room for a few seconds. Makes the dark feel a little less smug. Still, the silence comes back. It always comes back. Eventually you drift into sleep, not because you're comfortable, but because your body gives up. Your mind keeps drifting though, even in dreams. You dream of firelight, of full bellies and glowing windows and warmth that doesn't ask anything in return. The kind of warmth that comes with a door that stays closed and walls that don't leak. And when you wake again, there's frost on your pillow. Not outside, inside. That's when you know the candle wasn't the only thing burning out. You sleep in every piece of clothing you own. Shirt, coat, trousers, scarf, even socks on your hands. Makeshift mittens with holes in the heels where your fingers poke out. You wrap yourself tight, cocooned in threadbare layers, and still you wake shivering. This morning it's your breath that wakes you. Not the sound of it, but the sight. You open your eyes and see it hanging in the air, a slow cloud of mist swirling just inches from your face. There's a thin sheen of frost on the blanket. The room smells like damp wool and stale air. You cough, sharp and dry. It burns in your chest. But you're not sure if it's from the cold or the mould creeping along the corners of the room. Your sister used to sleep across from you, back when the two of you could take turns stoking the fire. Back when there was a fire, back when someone else in the room made it easier to ignore how your toes throbbed through the night. But she married last spring, moved to a better house, or so she said. You haven't heard from her in months. You imagine her in a room with thick quilts and a kitchen that still has salt. There's a quiet panic that comes with waking up this cold. You move your fingers slowly. 1, 2, 3. You lose count, then start again. They still work mostly, but your right pinky feels weird, numb, but also tingling. You try not to look at it too closely. You've seen what comes next. First, the skin turns a weird waxy white. Then it goes purple, then black, and then the real horror begins, when the pain stops, because that's when you know you've lost something. Today, you don't bother changing clothes. There's nothing clean to change into, and besides, undressing would mean letting go of the little heat your body's managed to trap. You roll out of bed and plant your feet on the wooden floor. Ice cold. Every step feels like stepping on knives. You consider peeing in the chamber pot under the bed, but it's frozen solid. You sigh. Another problem for another day. You make your way toward the main room, if you can even call it that. A kitchen without food, a fireplace without fire, a chair without legs. Every object in the room has the same problem. It's not what it used to be, and neither are you. Today you have one goal: stay warm without spending a single coin. You can't afford a candle, you've already burned through the last scrap of wood, and the rags you used to stuff the window have fallen out again. You shove them back in with your elbow. The air still leaks through. It's not a breeze, it's a warning. So you do what you've done the past 3 mornings. Gather up your courage, wrap a scarf tight around your nose and mouth, and leave the house. Not because you want to, but because you need to loiter. That's the trick you've learned. Stolen heat. You find places where warmth spills out into public. A bakery with its doors open, a tailor's shop with a crack in the door, a factory with an exhaust pipe low enough to sit beside. Today your first stop is the church. Not for prayer, not really, though you've whispered a few over the past weeks, mostly out of habit. But churches are warm, or at least warmer than home, and they rarely turn you away outright. You head inside quietly, sliding past the heavy wooden doors, your boots leaving small trails of slush. The sanctuary smells like damp stone, candle wax, and the faint rot of wet wool from other bodies who've had the same idea. You sit in a pew near the back, where the light from the stained glass barely reaches. You don't kneel. Your knees hurt too much from the cold. You just sit. Let your hands warm slowly against your chest. Close your eyes. Breathe. There are maybe a dozen others in the church. No one speaks. One man is asleep, head back against the wall, mouth open. You wonder if he's breathing, then see the slow rise of his chest and let it go. The priest walks past once. He sees you, but says nothing. Maybe he remembers your face. Or maybe he's just learned not to bother chasing out the cold. Here's a curious historical footnote. In medieval Europe, churches were known as poor men's inns during winter. They didn't just offer a sanctuary, they offered heat. Monasteries especially would open their doors to travellers and beggars for a few hours at a time. It was part charity, part penance. Of course, not all churches welcomed the poor. Some turned them away outright, or made them kneel for hours before offering anything more than a glance. You stay until the bells ring noon. That's when they usually start asking questions. Are you praying? Are you waiting for someone? Are you going to leave? So you leave. Your next stop is the alley behind the cobbler's shop. Not for boots, they're far too expensive. But because the shop has a vent in the back wall, just a tiny one, but enough that heat leaks out. You stand there with your back against the bricks, letting the air puff against your coat like the breath of a sleeping beast. A few others join you. No one talks. You all know the rules. If someone coughs too loud, the owner will slam the vent shut. You stay for maybe 30 minutes, long enough to feel your fingers again, long enough for the pain to creep out of your bones. Then you move on, before someone else pushes you out of the way. There's an academic theory, still debated, that poor people in winter developed a kind of urban heat map in their minds, not of warmth like we think of it today, but of access, which bakeries were kindest, which businesses allowed loitering, which back alleys had working steam vents. It was social cartography at its bleakest, survival through memorized warmth. You're part of that map now. By dusk, you're back home, hands trembling but still attached. You didn't spend a single coin. You didn't die. That counts as a good day. You wrap up again in bed, tucking your scarf around your face and pulling the blanket over your head. It smells like mildew and old ash. You don't care. You just want to feel something soft, even if it's only the illusion of safety. Somewhere outside, a dog howls once, then silence. And in that silence you realize even warmth can be stolen. but never for long. You can tell something's wrong before you open your eyes. It's in the stillness of the room, heavier than usual, the kind of quiet that presses on your ribs like a weight. You roll over slowly and notice your lungs are fighting harder this morning. The air tastes different, thicker, with a faint metallic sharpness. It doesn't feel like breathing. It feels like pulling in smoke that never clears. You sit up coughing long and dry until your chest aches and your head spins. That's new, and that's not good. You reach for the mug near your bed, but the water in it has frozen into a cloudy, uneven disk. You tip it anyway, hoping for something liquid. Nothing, not a single drop. Your throat is raw, your nose is bleeding again, and your skin stings from the dryness. You wipe your upper lip with your sleeve, only to find the fabric already stiff from yesterday's blood. Welcome to another day of existing. The worst part of getting sick in winter when you're poor isn't the sickness. It's the knowledge that you can't afford to get sick in the first place. You can't rest, you can't medicate, you can't take time off from work you don't even have. There's no buffer. One cough too deep and it's the beginning of the end. And here you are now, hunched over your knees, coughing so hard it feels like your ribs might crack open. You know this cough. It's the one that's been going around. Everyone's calling it the cold lung. You've seen what it does. Starts like this, tight chest, shallow breathing, a rattle when you exhale. Then comes the fever, then the weight loss. Then for some, the coffin. Or, if you're all lucky, a blanket pulled over your face in the middle of the night while the house stays quiet. You drag yourself out of bed anyway. The sun's up, but barely. The light through the window is colourless and weak, like someone painted it with dirty water. You pull on your coat, which still hasn't dried from yesterday, and wrap your scarf extra tight. You try not to think about the kids who used to wear scarves like this for fun, with matching mittens and laughter in their mouths. You try not to think about anything. Outside, the frost is heavier than it's been in weeks. The cobblestones are slick with ice, and your boots, patched for the third time with wax paper, slide every few steps. You walk with your arms slightly out for balance. The whole street looks like it's been dipped in glass. Even the rats are walking slower. You pass by Mrs. Denham's place on the way to nowhere. She used to sit by her window and knit. You haven't seen her in days. There's a black cloth tied to the door now. You nod slightly as you go by. You don't stop. You don't have the energy to grieve people anymore. You make it to the general store not because you can buy anything, but because standing near the front door means a few seconds of indoor air each time someone opens it. You stand there like a statue, face turned away, pretending to study the window display. Someone walks past and mutters something under their breath. You can't make it out. You don't care. You cough again, and this time there's something wet. You check your sleeve, blood. Just a dot, but enough. You turn your face to the wall and let it pass. The last thing you need is someone thinking you're contagious. The irony, of course, is that you are contagious, just not enough to make anyone care. Historically, winter diseases ravage the poor in ways we still struggle to quantify. Tuberculosis, influenza, pneumonia, illnesses we now associate with old age or weak immunity, were once as common as frost. And once they hit the lower class, they spread fast. Damp homes, close quarters, poor nutrition, and open sewers turned entire neighbourhoods into breeding grounds. There's a bitter little fringe theory that the only reason some cities even bothered cleaning up their slums in the 19th century was because disease started moving uphill, affecting the rich. That's when people started caring. Not when the poor died, but when the poor made the rich sick. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's just one more way history repeats itself. You leave the storefront and start heading toward the church again. Not because you're religious, but because there's warmth, and sometimes tea. You don't expect tea today. Your breath hitches halfway there. Not a cough. Something else. You feel lightheaded. You stop walking, lean against the side of a building, and take slow, shallow breaths. The world soons a little. You blink fast. Don't faint. Don't fall. If you fall here, no one will help you up. Eventually the air steadies. Your legs stop shaking. You keep walking. Inside the church, the pews are half full. Mostly people like you, shivering, silent, waiting for something that probably isn't coming. The priest gives a few words about suffering, about endurance, about spring. You sit and breathe through your scarf, eyes closed. Every now and then you hear someone cough and your body tightens in response. It's like a symphony of decay. You're just another instrument. You remember when you used to light candles here? Back when you had something to ask for. Now, if you lit one, you wouldn't even know what to say. Please make the air less sharp. Please let me keep my lungs. You don't stay long. It's too warm, ironically. Makes your head spin again. You head back into the street, where the cold at least keeps you alert. Here's something strange. Some historical records show that people in deep poverty often welcomed the cold. Not because they enjoyed it, but because it gave them a sense of control. Cold meant you were still alive, still fighting. Fever, on the other hand, meant you were slipping. And when you stopped feeling the cold entirely, that's when people knew to start digging. Back home, you collapse onto the bed and pull the covers over your face. Your chest is rattling now. Each breath feels like dragging air through broken glass. You wish you could sweat it out, but your skin is dry and cold to the touch. You don't know if this is the flu or just another bout of winter fatigue. You don't know if your body's failing or simply adapting. What you do know is that you can't afford to rest, but tonight you don't get a choice. Tonight you lie still and hope your lungs make it till morning. You wake up sweating, which would be great, if it weren't also terrifying. The fever must have crept in during the night, soft as snowfall. Your forehead slick, your undershirt damp, and your blanket suddenly feels like it's made of hot coals instead of threadbare cotton. You kick it off, then immediately shiver. Your body can't decide what season it's in. You sit up, dizzy, skin clammy, mouth bone dry. A deep cough claws its way up from your chest, and when it finally escapes, you're left gasping. There's a sour taste in your mouth like rust and old pennies. You reach for the water mug again, already behold knowing. Still frozen. The ice inside is paler than before, a sort of milky colour that makes you wonder how long it's been since you washed that thing properly. You think about smashing it for the slivers, letting one melt in your palm and licking it off like a dog. You settle for chewing a corner of snow off the windowsill instead. It's not just your lungs. Everything hurts. Your legs feel like they've been beaten with hammers, and your back is twisted into 1,000 little knots. Your stomach, weirdly, doesn't feel anything. Not pain, not hunger, just emptiness. That part's normal. You pull on your coat again, not because you're going anywhere, but because being upright without ease is unbearable. Your teeth start chattering before you've even made it to the door. You glance at the cracked mirror on the wall. Your face is pale, eyes sunken, lips grey at the edges. You look like someone who should be in bed, if bed meant more than a sack of rags. But you can't stay here. It's a strange thing the way desperation overrides illness. You could be halfway to pneumonia, ribs rattling like loose fence posts, and you'll still stand in line for soup, still wander the street for warmth, still look for work, even if the job would kill you, because at least then you'd be dying for something. So you walk. The street greets you with its usual cruelty, icy wind in your face, slush soaking through your soles within seconds, and a sky the colour of old bones. You pass other people moving the same way, slow, hunched, noses and mouths wrapped up like mummies. You recognise a few faces but don't nod. No one has the energy for politeness anymore. You head toward the kitchen near the square. It's run by a charity group, though you're not sure if it's church affiliated or just bored wives from the nicer part of town trying to earn spiritual credit. Doesn't matter. They serve broth, not soup, broth. If you show up early and stand very still, you might get a tin cup of it. It smells like water that once knew vegetables. The line is long, already stretching around the corner by the time you arrive. You shuffle to the end, tucking your hands under your arms. Everyone coughs. You cough too. You try to look less sick than you are. No one wants to stand near the contagious one, not out of fear of infection, but out of fear that the workers might turn you away. Too far gone is something you've heard whispered before. It takes over an hour to reach the front. The volunteer, a girl barely older than 16, cheeks red from standing near the fire inside, hands you the tin cup without meeting your eyes. You nod anyway. The broth is hot. It burns your tongue and you don't care. It's the best thing you've tasted in days. You sit on the curb and sip slowly, letting the steam sting your face, hoping it loosens whatever's settled in your lungs. Every now and then you glance at the others. A boy with a burst lip and no shoes. A woman in her 40s with hair falling out in clumps. An old man staring straight ahead, not blinking. No one talks. Here's a fact that doesn't make it into most history books. Soup kitchens weren't originally about food, they were about order. Cities started them in the 1800s, not just to feed the poor, but to keep them from rioting. A warm bowl meant fewer bodies breaking shop windows, a calculated kindness, designed to maintain peace more than dignity. There's a fringe theory that charity during winter was a kind of public performance, middle-class guilt turned into ladles and hymn singing. You sometimes think about that when you're handed food by someone wearing gloves worth more than your entire wardrobe, but you take the food anyway, You're finishing the last of the broth when someone nearby keels over. A soft thud. Heads turn, no screams, no panic, just a kind of quiet acknowledgement. A woman rushes forward and shakes the collapsed figure gently. The body doesn't respond. Fainted, someone mutters. Dead, someone else replies, less hopefully. You stare, but only for a moment. You don't want to look too long. You've learnt not to look too long at anything. There's an open debate among scholars about whether the social networks of the poor in winter truly functioned as mutual aid, or if everyone was just too busy surviving to help anyone else. Some say families stuck together, neighbours helped neighbours, blankets were shared and fires were pooled. Others argue that hunger makes you selfish. That winter taught people how to look out for themselves first, second, and only. You don't know which version is true. All you know is no one stops you as you walk away from the fallen man, and you don't stop either. You wander for a while, not because you have anywhere to go, but because moving keeps you warmer than sitting still. You duck into doorways when the wind picks up, peer into shops you can't afford. One tailor is lighting oil lamps inside, and for a second you think about offering to sweep his floor just for a few minutes near the stove, but then you catch your reflection in the glass. You look like sickness in a coat. You keep walking. By the time you reach home, your fever's back, worse than before. You lie down, still wearing your coat, too exhausted to take it off. You curl in on yourself, every breath a tight squeeze against your ribs. You try to sleep, but it's not real sleep. It's fever sleep. Flickering images, half memories, broken bits of conversation replayed in loops. You see your mother's face, not the real one, but the way your brain remembers it. Warm hands, gentle humming. You remember being wrapped in thick blankets you didn't appreciate at the time. Then the blankets are gone. You're cold again, and you're still breathing, but just barely. You wake up in the dark again. But something's different this time. The room isn't just cold, it's frozen. You can feel it in your eyelashes, stiff and clumped. Your breath escapes in short white puffs that rise like ghosts toward the ceiling. You sit up slowly, groaning. The blanket crackles where it's frosted over, and your coat feels damp, like it's been hanging in a meat cellar. When you touch the window, your fingers don't just leave a print, they stick. For a second, it's like touching dry ice. You yank your hand back, and it burns. That's when you notice the frost patterns. They're everywhere, spreading across the inside walls like delicate vines made of knives. Fern-like swirls crawling from corner to corner, creeping along the floorboards, threading up the furniture. The house has started to grow winter from the inside out. You stare at the ceiling and half expect to see icicles hanging from the beams. Honestly, you probably will by morning. You blow into your cupped hands. It does nothing. Your breath cools before it even reaches your skin. And now there's no denying it. Your room is colder inside than it is out on the street, which feels like a betrayal. 4 walls should mean something, right? Should protect you, or at least make you less vulnerable. But instead, they are just a coffin with better acoustics. You consider lighting something. Anything, but there's nothing left to burn. The last chair went into the fire 2 days ago. The table is too heavy to break up without tools, and the tools are gone, pawned weeks ago for half a loaf of bread and 2 potatoes you ate in a single sitting. All you have now are your clothes, your bedding, and a couple of old books too damp to catch flame, so you do what everyone else does. You wait for the sun. It's a miserable little trick, this dependence on daylight. It's not warm enough to change anything, really, but it feels different when the world's not pitch black. You pace a bit to keep your circulation going. That helps. For a few minutes at a time, you hum nonsense melodies to distract yourself from the fact that you can't feel the tips of 3 fingers. You tell yourself they're just asleep. You lie. Around midday, you step outside. The streets are oddly quiet. Snow has softened everything, blanketing the cobblestones in a layer of powder that mutes footsteps and wagon wheels. You'd call it beautiful, maybe, if you weren't walking through it with soaked boots and skin raw from frost. Every step feels like a dare. You see a woman walking the opposite direction with a child slung over her back. The child's face is red, wrapped in a scarf, eyes closed. The woman looks ahead blankly. No expression, just movement. It's the winter look, every person reduced to forward motion, no matter the direction, no matter the purpose. There's a coffee house on the corner that vents steam from its kitchen into the alley behind it. You already know the trick. You've stood there before, but today you find a group of 4 already huddled around the grate. Backs arched, arms crossed, breathing deep. One of them gives you a look like, don't even try it, so you don't. Instead, you walk toward the old stone building with the broken windows. It used to be a school. Now it's mostly a shell. Graffiti on the walls, the roof half collapsed, but still standing. And more importantly, it's still dry. On the coldest days, a few people use it for shelter. Not officially, of course, but no one's throwing you out either. You step inside. The air is bitter and smells of old wood, wet concrete and piss. There are 6 or 7 people scattered across the floor, wrapped in whatever they could find. Blankets, coats, newspapers. One man has a fire going in an old trash barrel. It's small, barely more than a flicker, but it's there. You walk slowly toward it. He looks up. He doesn't smile, but he doesn't move to block you either. You nod. That's enough. You join the circle. Everyone is quiet. There's no hello, no how are you, no introduction. Winter strips away all the pleasantries. It makes strangers out of neighbours and co-conspirators out of strangers. The fire flickers between you, and you feel the heat start to kiss your legs. You shift closer, gently, careful not to seem greedy. A woman to your left is missing her shoes. Her feet are wrapped in cloth and tied with twine. She rocks slowly, her breath shallow. Across from her, a teenage boy with a black eye is staring into the flames, unmoving. His hands are wrapped in what looks like cut-up underwear. Another man is muttering to himself about stew, over and over. No one responds. There's something eerie about a room full of people, all warming themselves by the same tiny fire, and yet completely alone in their heads. But it's not surprising. There's an old belief, a fringe one, that extreme cold could cause a kind of social disassociation, what some called ice madness. The idea was that too much time in freezing conditions without warmth or human contact could break a person's mind in quiet, unnoticed ways. Not like screaming or ranting, just slowly coming apart, one thought at a time. Sitting in this room now, you don't find the idea so far-fetched. Someone tosses a page of newspaper into the barrel, and the fire flares for a second. You soak it in, leaning forward just enough to feel your chest get warm. It's glorious. You could cry if your eyes had enough moisture left. Eventually someone coughs, a rough, deep sound like tearing canvas. People shift away instinctively. No one wants to catch anything in a place like this. Not that distance will save you. If someone here is carrying illness, you've all already shared the air. And then you hear the sound of bells. Distant but unmistakable. A church tower, marking the hour, you count the chimes. 4, meaning the sun will go down soon, and when it does, this room will be even colder. The barrel fire won't last the night. You decide to leave, partly because you can't stay, partly because you're scared of what happens in this place after dark. You say nothing as you get up, no one looks up. You step out into the evening and feel the temperature drop immediately. The air bites, your skin recoils, you wrap your scarf tighter. Back at your room, your walls are silent, like they've given up groaning. You crawl into bed again. The blanket has iced over near the window. You tear it off, whispering apologies to no one. Your fingers are clumsy as you tuck it around your body. You close your eyes. You dream of a room where the windows never frost, and the fire never dies. You wake to the sound of something cracking, and for a split second you're not sure if it's the wall, or your bones. The line's longer today. You spot it from 2 blocks away, twisting around the alley like a serpent of misery. Grey wool coats, patchy scarves, bare fingers rubbing together in a kind of desperate choreography. The soup kitchen door hasn't even opened yet, but the queue is already thick with fogged breath and silent stares. You join the end without saying a word. Nobody speaks in these lines. Speaking costs energy. Energy burns calories. Calories you don't have. Your fever's still lingering from the night before, but today you've decided that soup, real soup, isn't just food. It's medicine. You need heat in your belly, even if it's just one sip. You've started to dream about it, which is a dangerous thing. Once your body starts dreaming of food, it starts making promises it can't keep. The wind slices down the alley like it's got a vendetta. You press yourself against the brick wall to block it, but the bricks are damp, and the cold seeps through your coat like a whisper. You pull your scarf up over your nose and try to think of anything but your hands. They're throbbing now, even wrapped and stuffed into your sleeves. You curl your fingers slowly, counting to 5, checking for motion. 4 of them work. The 5th, the pinky on your left, isn't bending quite right anymore. It doesn't hurt. That's the problem. It's always the ones that don't hurt you should be afraid of. You've heard stories of people losing toes without even realizing it. A man in the workhouse once pulled off a sock and found 2 of them blackened, dead like shriveled plums. He didn't even scream, just laughed. A high, cracked sound like someone blowing air through broken glass. That's when you know someone's gone past the edge, when they laugh at their own body falling apart. You shift forward as the line creeps ahead. The kitchen is still 20 feet away, but the smell of something cooking drifts out through the cracked door. It smells like boiled onions, old beef bones, and hope. You stand straighter, just a little. Your stomach growls audibly, and the man in front of you glances over his shoulder, then looks away. Everyone here has a stomach that growls like that. No one talks about it. The kitchen door finally opens, and the volunteers begin waving people in, one at a time. The rest of you step forward like cattle, heads down, boots dragging. You recognize one of the workers, a thin woman with hard eyes and a clean apron. She used to teach sewing back when you had a mother who could afford to send you. Now she's ladling out watery soup to the same students she used to scold for slouching. When it's your turn, she doesn't say your name, but she knows it. Her mouth tightens slightly as she hands you a dented tin bowl filled with something brown and steaming. No meat, just potatoes and maybe a hint of lentil. But it's hot, and in this moment, that's all that matters. You don't thank her. You just nod and walk to the wall where others are already seated, eating like animals. Fast, messy, heads low, you sit and slurp the soup while it's still too hot. It burns your tongue, but you don't care. You don't even stop to breathe. It's thick enough to leave a coating on your lips. That's a good sign. Last week's batch was closer to dishwater than stew. You finish your portion in under a minute, then scrape the sides of the bowl with your thumb. You consider licking it clean, but someone's watching. There's a man across from you, older, his beard speckled with frost, his eyes sunken so deep they're nearly hidden. He doesn't blink as he eats, just shovels it in like it might vanish. You wonder how many times he's stood in this exact spot, how long he's been waiting for life to shift in his favour, how long you've been doing the same. You return the bowl and step back outside, already missing the warmth. The door closes behind you with a hollow thunk. You don't linger. There are rules. Eat, leave, make space for the next ghost. There's an argument among historians about these kitchens, whether they were actually helping or just delaying the inevitable. Some called them feed and fade stations, fill the poor enough to keep them from dying in the streets, but not enough to make them strong. Not enough to threaten the system, not enough to live. You wrap your scarf tighter and start walking. The soup gives you a few minutes of clarity, a brief window where the world seems less hostile. You can almost imagine the sun has warmth, that your coat is thicker than it is, that you've got somewhere to be, but it doesn't last. By the time you reach your block, the illusion is gone. The soup's settled in your belly like a memory, not filling, just not empty. You pass a man sitting on the stoop of a burned-out building. His shoes are gone, feet wrapped in layers of fabric, one soaked through with blood. He's cradling a lump under his coat. At first, you think it's a bundle of firewood. Then he shifts, and you see a child's face peek out. A baby, maybe 1, maybe 2 years old. Eyes wide, cheeks red from the cold. No crying, just watching the world quietly fall apart. You keep walking. Back inside, your room feels colder than usual. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. There's a silence that hums in your ears. You sit by the window and watch the frost thicken, tracing lines like scars across the glass. Every now and then a flake drifts down and sticks, melts slightly, then freezes again. It's hypnotic. You know the snow's only going to get heavier. You can feel it in your joints. Your body has become a barometer. When the pain in your knees spikes like this, a storm is always on its way. You wrap yourself in your blanket, now stiff with yesterday's damp, and sit on the floor instead of the bed. It's closer to the wall. Somehow that feels safer. You close your eyes, counting your breaths, 5 in, 5 out. Some fringe historians talk about winter-induced amnesia, a fog that settled in over the poor after too many days without sun, too many nights without warmth. A condition where people forgot what day it was, forgot how long they'd been hungry, forgot how to hope. You're starting to understand that now. You don't remember what month it is. You don't know what day it is, but you remember the soup, you remember the child's face, and you remember that the worst of winter hasn't even arrived yet. The sky's a strange shade of yellow this morning. Not bright, not golden, just a sickly, exhausted sort of light that barely cuts through the frost-streaked windows. It doesn't promise warmth or even visibility. It's the colour of coal smoke caught in fog, the kind that sinks low and stays there. You sit up slowly, your joints stiff from the cold and your muscles aching, in that deep settled way that only comes from sleeping in damp clothes on a floor that's colder than stone. You blink hard. Your eyelashes are frozen together again. That's happened 3 mornings in a row now. You rub your eyes and notice that the grime on your fingertips has turned grey. You sniff once and your nose wrinkles. The air inside your home has a weight to it, a taste almost. Bitter. Dry yet oily. You cough hard twice and spit something into your sleeve. It's black. Again, coal smokable smoke. That's what it is. You've been breathing it all night. Everyone has. You push yourself to your feet and look out the window, scraping a clear patch through the frost with your sleeve. Outside, the street looks half erased, just outlines of buildings and shapes moving through haze. The smog sits heavy over the neighbourhood, pressed down by the winter air like a wet blanket over a dying fire. You can't even see the buildings across the way. The smoke is thicker than fog, darker than mist, and clings to everything it touches. Your skin, your clothes, your lungs. You step outside anyway. You have to. You need to move even if it's nowhere. You take a breath through your scarf, but it doesn't help much. The air still scrapes your throat going in. It tastes like soot and cold metal. You're not surprised. This is normal now. The rich can afford chimneys that work properly. Tall ones that carry smoke high above the rooftops, away from their lungs and their linens. You're down here living where the smoke lands, where the coal dust settles like snow on every surface, where the flues are cracked or missing, and the heat you burn in desperation poisons you slowly in return. You pass a group of children playing in the slush. Playing might be the wrong word. They're just standing in it, really. One has a stick, another is throwing pebbles at a lamppost. Their faces are pale and their lips are blue, but they're still moving. That's something. You hear one of them cough, a raspy, phlegmy bark that makes your own chest tighten, in sympathy. You keep walking, the city's breathing in smoke today. You can see it rolling out of chimneys and factory stacks. Hanging low, swirling in the alleys, it never rises. It just thickens. Everything's covered in a fine grey film. Carts, doors, even the snow, which has turned from white to ash-coloured, then black at the edges. You turn a corner and nearly run into a horse cart. The driver curses at you without looking. You step aside quickly, slipping on a patch of ice covered in coal grit. Your hip smacks the wall as you catch yourself, and for a second the pain shocks you into full awareness. That's one way to stay warm, you think. Blunt trauma. There's a baker near the square who sometimes hands out scorched loaves at the end of the day. You're hoping today might be one of those days. You reach the shop and plant yourself nearby, pretending to read a notice pasted to the wall. You're not alone. 3 others hover like moths, all pretending they aren't hoping for the same thing. None of you talk. A puff of warm air escapes when the baker opens the door. You smell it instantly, yeast, flour, something toasted. Then the door shuts, and it's gone. That 2-second whiff will have to last you. He doesn't hand out anything today. You walk away, stomach clenched and mood darker than the sky. Another pointless errand. There's a scholar, long dead now, who wrote about the second winter of the working class. Not the weather, but the pollution. The kind that settled into lungs and bones. The kind that lingered long after the snow melted. He argued that this invisible winter did more long-term damage than frostbite or hunger. You remember reading about him once, years ago. You laughed at the idea then, now you feel it in your bones. Your breath rattles when you exhale. Not a wheeze, not quite, but close. Your chest feels tight, like someone's placed a sack of gravel on it overnight. You cough again, hard enough that your vision blurs for a second. You lean against a lamppost and press your hand to your ribs. Still there, still sore. You used to think winter was about snow, maybe some ice, a bit of wind. Now you know better. Winter is this: black lungs, bitter air, chimneys belching poison into a scar that refuses to carry it away. You walk back home slower than usual. Every step is an effort, your legs heavy, your breath shallow. At one point you stop and rest against the bricks of a crumbling wall, watching the smog swirl in slow circles above your head. It feels like you're underwater. Everything muffled, every sound dull. Back inside, you close the door and don't bother removing your coat. The room's colder than before and you're too tired to shiver. You sink to the floor, the boards hard beneath you. You cough again. There's a warm tickle in your throat now, then something wet. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve. Blood. More than before. You stare at it for a long time, then you wipe it away. The funny thing is, It doesn't scare you. Not really. Not anymore. It feels inevitable. Just one more step down a staircase you didn't choose to descend. Some call it coal cough. Some call it soot lung. Doctors might have called it bronchitis, if they'd ever come near a house like yours. But mostly, it's just the price you pay for breathing near the bottom of the ladder. You lean back and close your eyes. Your body feels heavier than ever. Outside, the smog keeps thickening. And upstairs, in the fancy parts of the city, the fires are still roaring. Clean, hot, safe. Their smoke rises. Yours sinks. That's the difference. The first time you loitered for warmth, you felt ashamed. Like a thief. Not of money, but of heat. You'd pressed yourself up against the stone wall of a bakery vent, inhaling the steam like it was soup, trying not to look desperate even though your teeth were chattering and your fingers were curled like claws inside your coat. That shame faded quickly. Now, loitering is just part of your daily routine. You don't think of it as stealing anymore. You think of it as survival math. A few stolen seconds of warmth equals a few more minutes your body doesn't have to fight for itself. You're good at it now, finding little pockets of heat in a city that wasn't built to share it. There's the steam grate behind the print shop that hisses every morning. The laundry that vents warm air if you lean near the alley door. The lantern outside the constable's post that gives off enough heat to warm one hand at a time if you hover just right. You rotate between these places like a ghost drifting from altar to altar. Today your first stop is the grocer's. Not to buy anything, you haven't had coin in over a week, but because they keep the front door cracked open just enough for warmth to spill out into the street. You hover near the crates of root vegetables, pretending to inspect a turnip you can't afford. The trick is to look like you're about to buy something. Not browsing, but deciding. Grocers tolerate you longer when you look indecisive. After about 5 minutes, the shop boy gives you a glance. Nothing sharp yet, just a warning flick of the eyes. You nod like you've made a decision and step back out into the cold. No hard feelings. That's just the game. Outside, the city is creaking again. Not loudly, but in that low, constant way buildings do when the cold gets deep enough into their bones. The shutters rattle. The iron fences hum. Somewhere in the distance you hear a pane of glass shatter. A clean, brittle sound that echoes down the alley. Someone's window just gave up. You head toward the factory row next. The mills run even in winter, their windows glowing orange from the heat of the machines inside. You can't get into the building, no one gets in without a pass. But you know a back wall that leaks warmth through a crack in the foundation. It's not much, just a trickle of hot air that smells like grease and burned fabric. But if you sit close, it's enough to thaw your fingertips. You wedge yourself into place beside the wall, hunch your shoulders, and breathe through your scarf. 5 minutes pass, then 10. You feel the pain fade from your hands, then return as they start to thaw. The sting of circulation coming back, you grit your teeth and let it happen. You're getting good at measuring suffering and exchange rates. 10 minutes of fireflesh pain for an hour of finger mobility? You'll take it. A young woman joins you a few minutes later, eyes hollow, lips cracked. She doesn't speak, she just slides into the space next to you and holds out her hands to the leaking warmth. You nod. She nods. That's enough. Sometimes these little borrowed patches of heat are the closest thing you get to community. No one talks, but there's a shared code. You don't push, you don't hog, you don't stay too long, and when someone new comes, you make room, even if you can't afford to. There's this strange, unofficial geography to the poor in winter. You know the warm corners of every district better than you know the names of the streets. You could draw a map in your sleep, not of landmarks but of survival, where the heat spills out, where the guards look the other way, where the shadows stretch longest when the wind rises. It's not a city map, it's a weather map, a scavenger's atlas for people with nothing to burn but time. Historians rarely write about this. They talk about coal shortages and fuel prices, but they don't capture what it means to chase warmth like it's a moving target. They don't write about standing outside a bakery just for the privilege of thawing one cheek, or pressing your bare hands to the side of a horse for a second of body heat before the driver shoos you away. There's a boy you've seen more than once, maybe 9 or 10, who presses himself against the Beutler house wall for hours, not moving, just leaning into it with his arms folded like he's in love with the brick. You've seen him fall asleep there, standing. You've seen someone try to push him off and he's shoved back like a cornered animal. You get it. Later in the day, you try the train station. Not the front, where the guards would notice. You know a side entrance where the delivery staff wheel in coal. The vents there blow hot air for exactly 30 minutes after every shipment. You wait. You get 15 of those minutes before the foreman comes out and waves a broom at the group of you huddled there. "Move on, rats," he shouts, more tired than angry. You don't argue. You just disperse like mist. Another rule of loitering: never push it. There are only so many spots, and you can't afford to lose any. You walk off, hands still warm, breath still visible. There's a fringe belief in some circles that the poor developed a sort of sixth sense for temperature during hard winters. Not just noticing cold, but locating warmth. Like bloodhounds for fire. You believe it. Your body reacts before your brain now. You walk through a street and know, this wall is warm, that door leaks heat, this pipe is worth clinging to for 3 minutes. You think of it as your only real skill. By the time night falls, you've had 3 hot spots, 1 free ladle of watery broth, and half a crust of bread you found near the tram depot. A better day than most. You head back home with the kind of weariness that sinks deeper than your muscles. You're not tired from walking, you're tired from chasing heat. Your room greets you with its usual breath of icy warmth. The floor is colder than it was this morning. The rags in the window are stiff. You sit on the edge of the bed and peel your boots off slowly. 1 sock is soaked in blood. You don't even flinch anymore. Just peel it off and stuff the toe with cloth. It's not about comfort, it's about keeping everything attached. You crawl under the blanket, still wearing your coat. You wrap your scarf around your face and lie still. Your breath warms the air inside the fabric. You feel your own heat slowly filling that tiny space. It's not much, but it's yours. Today, you stole warmth from 6 different places, but in the end, you'll only keep the heat your body can hold. And that's the cruel truth. No matter how many fires you borrow, the cold always waits for you to come home. Your shoes are dying, not like a metaphor, not in the poetic way people sort of talk about worn boots and hard lives. No, these are literally collapsing beneath you. Soles flapping like the mouths of dying fish. The leather cracked wide across the top. Laces long gone and replaced with bits of twine and blind optimism. You tried stuffing rags inside to keep your toes from scraping the ground, but the cloth soaked through days ago and now just holds the cold like a sponge. Today you step outside and immediately feel the snow hit skin it shouldn't reach. Your right foot is completely exposed where the sole tore loose last night. You had hoped the cold would freeze the flap shut, but no such luck. You walk with a limp, trying to keep that foot lifted just slightly off the ground, which works for about 3 steps. Then the pain sets in, deep and immediate. Your toes feel like they're being pried apart by metal tongs. You don't stop walking though. You can't. If you stop, you freeze. That's the rule. You make it 2 blocks before you have to sit down. There's a stone step near the alley behind the brewery. You lower yourself onto it and pull your foot up onto your knee. It's not good. Your sock is frozen stiff, brown with old blood and something else. Maybe frostbite pus, maybe rot. You touch the skin through the hole in the sock. You feel nothing. That's worse than pain. Pain means there's still something to save. You look around, pretending you're just tying your shoe, as if anyone believes that anymore. The city moves around you, slow, grey, quiet. No one looks down, no one asks if you're okay. They have their own feet to worry about. You think about taking the sock off, just to check the damage, but you don't. You're scared of what you'll see. You've heard the stories, people peeling off layers of skin along with the fabric, toes coming off with boots. A boy down the block lost 3 last year. He used to joke that he walked lopsided now because winter played favourites. You stand up slowly, foot screaming even as it refuses to feel. You adjust the twine around your ankle to keep the flap from dragging, then walk on. The movement warms you, barely. Enough to keep you conscious, enough to keep your blood pumping. Maybe. There's a cobbler 2 streets down, you know him, or rather, you know his daughter. She once gave you a bit of stitching thread when your coat split down the back. You'd only exchanged a few words, but it was something. You think about stopping by there, asking if they've got anything discarded. Anything at all. 1 shoe even, mismatched. Doesn't matter. Something to keep your foot off the ice. But as you turn the corner, you hesitate. The shop front is clean, lamps burning in the window. Someone with real money is inside, being fitted. You see the edge of a polished boot, the glint of brass buckles. You know your reflection is somewhere on the glass, and you know what it looks like. A beggar, a liability. You step back into the shadow and wait for the customer to leave. They don't. You count to 60, then turn and walk away. You've stopped believing in help. Here's something not many know. In some parts of 19th century Europe, people wrapped their feet in straw during winter. Not for comfort, but for survival. Straw was cheap everywhere and dry when you could find it. It acted as insulation. Poor man's wool, you've done it. The problem is, once it gets wet, it becomes just another layer of icy misery wrapped around your skin. There's another trick you've heard. Cutting cardboard to fit inside your shoe, creating a buffer between your foot and the sole. But cardboard's hard to come by in dry condition. Everything's damp. Everything freezes. Even the trash isn't what it used to be. You limp past a man selling old coats from a cart. Most are too large, too torn, or too expensive. You glance down and see a single boot near the edge, cracked, laces missing, tongue stiff with grime. It's left foot only. Your right is the problem. Of course, still you ask. You got the other? The man squints. Nah, found that one in the snow. Yours for a halfpenny. You don't have a halfpenny, you don't argue, you move on. The idea of footwear as a luxury feels absurd until you don't have it. Then it becomes everything. Your foot is raw now. You feel the scrape of ice crystals with every step. Somewhere near the heel, the skin has split. You know that feeling too well. Cold skin doesn't stretch, it cracks. And when it does, it bleeds slowly, then freezes in a thin layer that keeps opening and reopening every time you take another step. There's a man curled in a stairwell near the train station. His boots are off. He's holding them against his chest like a child would hold a doll. He's barefoot. The skin of his feet is black and peeling. The toenails gone, the toes curled inward unnaturally. You stop for a moment, wondering if he's alive. He breathes. Barely. You don't speak to him. You just look down at your own foot and know you're not far behind. You turn toward home, slowly. Every step is a gamble now. Every sidewalk corner could be your last. You think about just sitting somewhere and not moving. Letting the cold do what it wants. Letting your body decide if it's had enough. But then you pass a bakery vent. Warm air, faint and greasy, drifts toward you. You stand near it for a full minute. You pull off your boot, remove the sock, and hold your foot near the vent, just for a second. The heat stings immediately. Pain floods in, sharp, stabbing, electric. You grit your teeth and ride it out. You look away, pretending this is normal. It's not, but it's something. A historian once wrote that poverty is a narrowing of options until death feels like a reasonable choice. You think about that as you slip your ruined sock back on and retie the twine around your ankle. You're not dying today, not because you're brave, but because the wind hasn't taken everything yet. Back home, you collapse onto your bed, curling up like a question mark. Your foot throbs, your fingers twitch. You cover yourself in the last blanket you own, still damp, still thin, and whisper thanks to no one in particular. Tomorrow, the same foot, the same boot, the same walk, and if not tomorrow, then the next. Because when you've got no shoes and no mercy, you walk anyway. There's a sound you start to recognize in winter. It's not the wind or the creak of beams or the rattling of window panes. That's background noise, a kind of cold weather static. No, this sound is smaller, quieter, but it sticks in your chest like a hook. It's the sound of a child coughing in the middle of the night. You hear it again now, muffled through the walls, high-pitched, thin, fragile, like it might snap in half if it goes on too long. You freeze where you're sitting, half wrapped in a blanket on the floor, holding a crust of dry bread in one hand, chewing like a rat. You know that cough, not the specific child, but the pattern. 2 short hacks, then silence, then a deeper one from the belly. That's the sickness working its way inward. You don't even know which family it is. They're new. Moved into the unit down the hall just before the first snow. Mother, 2 children, maybe a third. They're quiet, keep to themselves. One of the boys is small, no more than 6. Big eyes. Always wrapped in a coat that used to be blue, now faded to the colour of dirty ice. You saw him 2 days ago sitting on the stairs eating something out of a tin can with his fingers. You nodded. He didn't nod back. Now he's coughing like his lungs are trying to climb out of his chest. You press your head back against the wall and close your eyes. You try not to listen, but you can't help it. Every time the cough cuts through the silence, your stomach knots tighter. Not because you can do anything about it. You can't. But because there's a kind of helplessness that sticks to you like frostbite. You know what's happening. You know how this ends, and you can't stop it. It's worse for children. Everyone knows it. Their bodies are smaller, thinner, faster to lose heat. A cold that would knock you flat for a day can bury a child in less than a week. Their immune systems can't keep up, not when there's mould in the walls and no fire in the hearth. You've seen it before. and you're seeing it again, even if you're not looking. You try to sleep, but it's hard to sleep when you're listening for the cough to stop, because when it stops, that's when it's either too late or much, much worse. There's an awful truth to winter in places like this. Children are the first to go. They're the canaries in the coal mine, the first to feel the bite of the cold, the first to fall when the food runs out, the first to catch the sickness that starts as a sniffle and ends in silence. Every tenement has seen it. Every poor district. Every slum. It's not talked about in school books. Not really. But look into the old census records and you'll see it plain as day. Child mortality spikes every time the temperature drops below freezing. And it's not just from disease. It's from exposure, malnutrition, smoke inhalation, unsafe sleeping arrangements, and the thousand small failures of a world that won't lift a finger to save the smallest among us. You've heard of mothers sleeping with their infants tucked under their arms, trying to share their body heat, only to wake in the morning and find the child cold and stiff. No scream, no struggle, just a quiet fading in the night. Some say it's peaceful. You're not so sure. You rise to your feet, bones cracking, and move to the window. It's snowing again. Fat flakes falling slowly, blanketing the alley in deceptive softness. From up here it looks gentle, clean, but you know better. That snow will weigh down the roof, it'll clog the chimney, it'll seep in through the gaps in the windows, and under it all the cold will wait patiently. You think again of the boy in the stairwell, big eyes, no gloves, always holding his hands in his armpits like he was trying to hide the fact that he still had fingers. You consider knocking on their door, offering something, but what would you give? Your blanket, your bread, your own heat? There's a cruel math to it all. One life for another. One warm bed or none. In these conditions, generosity isn't just difficult, it's dangerous. It shortens your odds, and yet, that cough. You reach for the crust of bread you tucked away earlier. You stare at it for a moment. Then you wrap it in a scrap of cloth and step into the hallway. The floorboards groan under your feet, and the wind rushes past the cracked window near the stairs like it's trying to warn you away. You ignore it. You knock once, softly. No answer. You knock again. After a long pause, the door creaks open just enough for one eye to peek through. It's the mother. She looks tired in a way that's older than age. Hair matted, lips pale, eyes hollow. You hold out the bundle without speaking. She takes it slowly. Doesn't say thank you. Just nods once. You nod back. Then you walk away, back into your own room, where nothing has changed except the temperature in your heart. You sit back down and pull the blanket over your shoulders. You try to forget what you heard. But now you're listening harder. Not for the cough, but for silence. You wonder what kind of world this is, where giving a piece of bread feels like martyrdom, where you can't afford to help and can't afford not to, where death comes wrapped in a child's wheeze, and winter is a thief that always starts small. A historian once argued that child mortality in lower-class urban areas during harsh winters wasn't a tragedy. It was an expected demographic adjustment. You remember reading that and wanting to throw the book into a fire, but you didn't have a fire, and the book was from the library. So instead you just closed it and sat in the cold, wondering how someone could turn human suffering into a spreadsheet. The boy's coughing again, weaker now. You lie back on your bed, arm over your eyes. Tomorrow, if he's still breathing, you'll find another crust. If not, well, winter always makes room for one more empty bed. You've always had mixed feelings about charity. Not the kind where someone shares a crust of bread or a warm spot on a stoop. That's survival. That's solidarity. That's the kind of kindness that costs something, what little it's worth, and still gets given anyway. No, your issue is with the other kind of charity. The kind that wears fur-lined gloves while ladling soup. The kind that smells of perfume and guilt. The kind that arrives in horse-drawn carriages once a month, handing out stale loaves and pity through barely cracked windows. It's Alms Day today, or so the little chalkboard says, propped outside the mission house. You noticed it on your way back from the factory gates. Another morning of rejection, another dozen bodies ahead of you. The word was spelled in tight, neat letters. Alms today, 11/22, no loitering. That last part was underlined twice. You debate even showing up. Half the time it's not worth it. Cold bread, the occasional blanket riddled with holes, a lecture about moral hygiene. But the other half of the time, it's something real. A thick pair of socks, a half-pound of dried beans, once even a coat that only had one missing button, and you're out of everything. So, at 10:45 you take your place in line outside the mission doors. The line already curls around the corner, filled with people you've come to recognise not by name but by limp, by cough, by coat. There's the man with the crooked back who always wears two hats stacked together. The woman who mutters numbers under her breath, always counting something invisible. A boy missing 3 fingers. You nod to a few of them, not friendly, just acknowledgement. Everyone here is standing in their shame together. You don't need introductions, the air stinks of coal smoke and desperation. You shift from foot to foot, trying to keep your toes from going numb again. A girl behind you is crying quietly, that muffled sound you recognise as hunger, mixed with exhaustion. Her mother rubs her back, whispering promises she probably can't keep. You try not to listen. But everything echoes when you're cold. The doors open at 11 sharp and the line moves in slow, bitter pulses. The volunteers are always the same, wealthy women in stiff collars and clean boots, expressions locked between condescension and fragile empathy. They wear their charity like jewellery, and they hand out rations with gloved hands. God forbid the poor touch their skin. When your turn comes, you step forward and hold out your sack, the one you've used for months, patched twice, tummied with string. A woman with iron grey hair and a polished brooch glances you over. She doesn't ask your name. She doesn't need to. You're not a person to her. You're an entry on a list. One needy, one pauper. One able-bodied male, undernourished. She drops a heel of bread into your bag, then a strip of flannel, probably torn from some aristocrat's nightgown. Lastly, a small lump of something wrapped in paper. Tallow, she says before turning away. No smile, no blessing, no stay warm. You almost laugh. The lump of tallow is both a gift and an insult. You know what it's meant for. You're supposed to smear it on your boots to make them last another week. Or use it to oil a lamp if you have one. Or, if things get bad enough, spread it on bread like butter. You've done that before. Tallow's not made for eating, but in the right light, with the right kind of hunger, anything becomes food. You step aside and let the next person shuffle forward. Outside, you sit on the curb and examine your haul. The bread's hard as a rock, but you've got teeth. The flannel's enough for a scarf or maybe a wrap for your foot. The tallow you pocket carefully. That could save your toes if the weather drops again, or your stomach if nothing else shows up. You look around. Everyone's doing the same thing, inspecting, calculating, deciding whether today was a blessing or a mockery. Across the street, a man opens his care bundle and finds a bar of soap. He stares at it like it's a joke. Then he starts to laugh. Real laughter, loud, cracked, bitter. Everyone flinches. "I ain't washed in 3 weeks," he shouts, holding the soap up like a prize. "What they want me to do, scrub my own damn grave?" No one responds. What can you say? There's a historical theory, long debated, that charity was never meant to help the poor escape poverty. It was designed to manage them, to keep them quiet, to keep them in line. Food enough to live, not enough to question. Blankets enough to shiver, not enough to leave. And above all, to remind you who's in charge. Because every loaf handed out with a grimace is another reminder that your life depends on someone else's fleeting sense of generosity. You felt that firsthand. You remember the first time you went to a charity house? You were 13. Your father had died the previous spring, coal dust in his lungs probably, and your mother hadn't eaten in 2 days. You walked to the front steps with a tin can in your hands and waited to be noticed. When they finally opened the door, the woman who answered didn't look at you. She looked through you. You've carried that feeling ever since, and yet here you are again, taking the scraps. Because when you're freezing, when your body aches and your stomach is a hollow drum, pride is a luxury you can't afford. You tell yourself you'll give something back someday, that when you're able, you'll hand someone a blanket without waiting for their thanks. But today, you just go home and wrap the flannel around your leg like a bandage, bite into the bread, and try not to break a tooth. Night falls early again. The room's colder than yesterday. You light a stub of candle using the last bit of match you've saved and hold your hands over the weak flame. You don't think of the woman with the brooch. You don't think of her clean gloves or her distant eyes. You think of the soap. You think of the laughter. And you think about what it means to be helped only just enough not to die. You told yourself you'd never end up here. Not because you were better than anyone else, not because you had a plan, but because, somehow, you thought you'd stay lucky, or invisible, or outside of it. The workhouse was always something that happened to other people. The drunks, the ones who gave up, the ones who'd already lost everything. But winter doesn't care about resolve. It grinds you down slowly, methodically, until all the lines you drew in the sand get buried beneath snow and survival. You stare up at the grey stone building, its chimneys puffing smoke into the sky like stums. No sign, no decoration. Just block after block of cold walls and narrow windows. You could pass it 100 times and never notice it unless you knew to look. But now that you're standing in front of it feels enormous. Not in size, in weight. You don't knock. There's nothing to knock on. You just step into the front corridor, boots sloshing from the thawed slush on the street. A man behind a desk looks up, bored and blinking. His coat is too clean, too neat, as if the chill and the dirt outside can't quite touch him. "Name," he says, not unkindly. You hesitate, not because you forgot it, but because something about speaking it here feels like the final surrender. You tell him anyway. He asks a few more questions. Age, occupation, any dependence, any illness. You lie on the last part just slightly. You say your cough is better. You don't want them thinking you're too close to death. They are not a hospital. They'll throw you back into the street if they think you're past the point of return. He jots something down and waves you through to the next room. There's a smell here you'll never forget, even if you walk back out and never return. It's sour and warm at the same time, like wet wool, rotting bread, and too many bodies in too small a space. The floor is covered in grime that someone tried to mop up half-heartedly. The walls are lined with benches, most of them filled. Men, women, a few older children staring blankly. Everyone looks like a shadow of something they used to be. A thin woman in a stained apron takes your coat. She doesn't ask, just tugs it off your shoulders with practiced hands and mutters something about lice. You want to say there aren't any, but you don't argue. She drops it in a burlap sack without ceremony. You're told to wash. The water's cold but not frozen, which almost feels like a blessing. You scrub quickly, avoiding eye contact with the other men beside you. One coughs the entire time, a wet sound that echoes off the tiled walls. You hope it's not your future. You hope it's not your fault. Then you're given a new set of clothes. Uniform is the wrong word. They are grey, scratchy, stiff from being dried near a fire without ever really being cleaned. You put them on and feel yourself disappearing. Your coat was torn, yes. Your shirt had holes. But they were yours. These are not. These belong to the building. A few minutes later, you're shown to your cot. If it can even be called that. A thin mattress on a wooden frame crammed between two others in a long silent row. You sit. That's all. You sit and wait. No one tells you what's next. No one seems to know. Eventually a bell rings. Food. You shuffle into a narrow dining hall where rows of tables stretch under low ceilings. The bowls are already filled. Something grey and lumpy, maybe porridge, maybe something worse. You sit down, pick up the spoon and start eating without thinking. You can't taste it. It doesn't matter. Somewhere to your left, two men whisper about work duty. One says he's on coal haul tomorrow, the other mutters about the latrines. You don't ask where you'll be, you assume someone will tell you when it matters. Historically, workhouses were designed not just to shelter the poor, but to discourage them. The conditions were meant to be harsh enough that no one would come unless they truly had nowhere else. Less eligibility, they called it. A system where life outside the workhouse had to remain marginally better than life inside. Otherwise, everyone might want in, and the state wasn't paying for that. You think about that as you scrape the bottom of your bowl. The spoon clinks loudly. A guard glares at you from the doorway. You lower your eyes. Back in the dormitory, someone's already lying down in your cot. A young man, maybe 17, eyes closed, thin as wire. You don't argue. There are no rules here, or not really. You take the cot next to it. Someone hands you a blanket. It's damp and smells like mildew. You lie down. The room is quiet, except for coughing. Always coughing. And in the dark, a voice says, You knew? You nod before realizing they can't see you. Yeah, you whisper. They don't respond. Eventually someone begins snoring. Someone else mutters in their sleep. A fight breaks out in the hall, just yelling, no punches. Then silence again. Your back aches. Your throat burns. You stare at the ceiling and count the cracks. You told yourself you'd never end up here. But the truth is, most people don't fall into the workhouse. They get pushed, bit by bit, inch by inch. Frozen toes, empty bowls. Doors that stayed closed one too many times. Tomorrow they'll tell you what job you're doing. It'll be hard, it'll hurt, it might kill you. But at least it'll keep you here another day. At least there's a roof, a bowl, a cot, and somehow that counts as mercy. There's something primal about the way winter makes you feel hunted. Not just by cold, not just by hunger, but by everything that circles outside the line between barely alive and not quite dead. And some days, like today, you wonder if something out there can smell your weakness. It's not paranoia, it's just winter logic. The slower you move, the more likely something is to catch you, and right now you're moving slow. It started this morning with a sound outside the workhouse, low and distant, a kind of howl. Not the wind of this time. It was fuller than that, heavier. You paused on your way out to your assigned job, shoveling ash out of a coal chute, and looked toward the edge of the yard. Nothing, just snow and tracks and soot-stained footprints disappearing into grey distance. The guard told you to keep moving, you did, but you still heard it again, later, closer. The others noticed too. Someone whispered that a dog had been spotted near the river. A big one, mangy, mean. Someone else said it wasn't a dog at all, but a wolf that had wandered down from the northern woods, starved out of its den by the snow. You laughed at first. A wolf in the city, but then again, you've seen stranger things this winter. The truth is, predators don't always walk on 4 legs. The longer you live in the lower cracks of society, the more you realise winter doesn't just sharpen the cold, it sharpens people too. You learn which alleys to avoid after dark, which men linger too long near the breadline, which children have already stopped acting like children. You learn the quiet body language of threat, the subtle shift from hunger to wanting something that doesn't belong to you. Back in the old neighbourhood here, you used to know a man called Rook. Broad shoulders, heavy coat, always wore gloves, even when it wasn't cold. No one knew where he lived, he just appeared, usually when someone was at their worst. Offered help, a place to stay, a meal sometimes, but there were always strings, and when those strings pulled tight, people disappeared. You think of Rook today, when you see a group of men standing at the corner outside the workhouse fence. Not guards, not workers, just watching. One of them nods when he sees you. It's not a greeting, it's a mark. You know what it means. You look away and keep walking. There's a long-standing myth that wild animals don't come near cities in winter, that the noise and stone and smoke keep them away. But history says otherwise. During particularly bad freezes, wolves were spotted at the edges of Paris. Boars wandered into London's outskirts during the food shortages. Even bears, once in northern Russia, desperate enough to dig through waste heaps beside peasants who were doing the same. You're not saying there's a wolf outside the city walls right now, you're saying it wouldn't surprise you. Because everything's starving. Everything's desperate. Even the animals that used to be scared of people are starting to realise the balance has shifted. We're not on top anymore. Not down here. Not when you're wrapped in rags and bleeding from cracked skin and coughing blood into a blanket you share with the 4 other men. Not when even dogs look at you like meat. And then there's the literal kind, the human wolves. The ones who linger near the soup line and follow you home. The ones who offer you warmth in exchange for a favour. The ones who size you up not for a job, but for whether you're weak enough to rob. You've escaped that a few times now, not because you're fast, but because you've learned how to look unfazed. Confidence is a costume. You wear it to stay uneaten. Today you're assigned to carry wood from the workhouse yard to the storage room. It's the kind of job they usually give to the stronger ones, but you've lost so much weight that they have mistaken your narrowness for strength. You don't correct them. You need the heat of the work, even if your arms tremble by the 3rd trip. Outside, the snow is hard and brittle underfoot. The wind whistles low and constant. As you bend to lift another stack of kindling, you notice something at the edge of the yard. Tracks. Not boot prints, not horseshoes, paw prints, large and fresh. You stare at them for a second longer than you should. The man beside you spits in the snow and shrugs. Could be a big dog, he mutters. You nod. Could be. But deep down, something twists. You know what you saw, and more importantly, you know the way the others are pretending not to have seen it. Pretending is the last refuge of people who can't afford to panic. Back inside, the men talk in hushed tones. Not about wolves, about ration theft, about one of the workers disappearing after leaving late last night, about someone breaking into the infirmary for pain tincture. You don't ask questions, you sit on your cot and stare at your hands. The nail on your index finger is turning black. You press it gently, no pain. That's probably worse than pain. Night comes fast again, it always does now. The grey turns to pitch like someone flipped a switch. The windows in the workhouse go dark except for the corridor, where the lamps burn low. You lie under your blanket, already bracing for another night of cold, but tonight the air feels wrong. It's too quiet. Even the coughing has stopped. You sit up slowly and strain your ears. Somewhere in the distance, far off but clear, you hear it again. A howl, not long, just a single note. but it cuts through the night like a blade. You lie back down and pull the blanket over your head, not because you think it'll protect you, just because you don't want to hear what comes next. The scholar in you remembers something from an old textbook, that fear sharpens your senses even as it dulls your judgment. You wonder which side of that coin you're on tonight. Out there something is hungry, and in here everything is vulnerable. You close your eyes and listen to your own breath, and you pray the wolves, whatever kind they are, stay on the other side of the wall. The blanket's thin, and the nights are thinner. You've stopped sleeping deeply, if you even sleep at all. It's more like drifting in and out, slipping beneath the surface only to jolt awake at the smallest sound. Footsteps in the corridor, someone coughing near your cot, the brittle snap of ice forming along the window frame. Your body doesn't rest anymore. It waits. You're in a constant state of pause, suspended between moments, conserving energy like a dying fire trying to keep its last ember glowing. You wake up in the dark, throat sore, chest tight. There's frost along the inside of the window near your bed. Actual frost. Indoors. You watch it grow, slowly creeping like it's alive, carving silent ferns into the glass. You don't even have the energy to be surprised anymore. Of course it's cold. Of course the ice is moving in. You sit up and reach for your boots. One of them is missing a sole entirely now, so you've taken to cutting strips from your blanket to pad the bottom. The blanket's fraying at the edges. You tell yourself it's worth it. One warm foot of the foot is better than two frostbitten ones. You pull on your coat, still damp around the collar, and stand. Your knees crack as you straighten up. You're 27 years old, but in this weather, in this life, you feel 70. Today is a cold day. The guards tell you so without much ceremony. You and half a dozen others are marched out of the workhouse yard toward the coal depot across town. No wagon, no horse, just sacks and shoulders. You're to haul half-filled bags of coal back to the workhouse to keep the kitchen running for another week. You try to be grateful. At least the labour will warm you up. The walk is brutal. The wind's sharp and dry today, cutting across the alleys like a saw. You pull your scarf up high, over your nose, go, and tuck your chin down like a turtle. It doesn't help, the cold finds its way in anyway. It always does. It's patient like that, calculated. You imagine winter as a living thing sometimes, not a storm, but a person. Something with a long memory and a slow hand. Something that waits for you to get tired, then presses just a little harder. The depot is chaos. Piles of coal stacked like crooked mountains, black dust clinging to every surface. You wait in line, watching a man with a shovel toss heaps of it into the sacks like it's dirt. When it's your turn, you throw the sack over your back and nearly buckle under the weight. It's heavier than you remember, or maybe you're weaker. Probably both. You start the walk back, hunched under 40 pounds of black stone that soaks through your coat and shirt, chilling your spine with every step. You don't complain. No one does. Complaints take breath. Breath means heat loss. So you all march in silence, a line of grey figures dragging shadows through the snow. By the time you reach the workhouse again, your shoulders are raw and your hands are black with soot. You look like you've been carved out of smoke. You drop the sack near the cellar door and stretch your back slowly, praying something doesn't give out. A man nearby drops to his knees, gasping. No one helps him. Not because they're cruel, because if you stop moving, you're next. The rest of the day blurs. More sacks, more trips. Lunch is a ladle of gruel that tastes like dirt and regret. You eat it anyway. The warmth of it hits your stomach like a punch. You'd cry from relief, but your tear ducts are dry. Later, as the sun starts to slip behind the grey rooftops, someone hands out blankets, just a few, torn ones pulled from a storage chest that smells of mildew and rot. You get one. It's stained and full of holes, but it's thick. Heavier than the one you've been using. You wrap it around your shoulders like armour. You even smile a little. Not much, just enough. There's a small, strange joy in that moment. A feeling you haven't tasted in weeks. The weight of the blanket feels like a shield. A hug. You think back to something your mother used to say. A good blanket can save a life. You didn't understand what she meant at the time. Now you do. Later that night, lying in your cot wrapped in your new prize, you notice something odd. The man next to you is shivering violently, his blanket's thin as gauze. He doesn't say anything, but his teeth are chattering so hard you can hear it across the room. You tighten your own blanket and look away. But the guilt settles fast. You stare at the ceiling. The candlelight from the corridor flickers in and out, casting your thoughts in long shadows. You roll over. Look at the man again. He's young, barely a man at all, maybe 17. You remember being 17. You still had all your teeth. Your fingers still bent properly. Your coat still had buttons. You shift in bed, then curse quietly under your breath. You peel off half the blanket and drape it over him, gently. He doesn't open his eyes, but the shivering slows. You lie back down, now only half warm again. But the room feels better. There's a historian you once read, a minor one, barely footnoted, who wrote about small mercies during winter. A crust of bread, a borrowed scarf, a fire shared by 5 hands instead of 4. He argued that civilization isn't built on laws or kings or treaties. It's built on blankets shared in the dark. You remember thinking that was sentimental nonsense. Now, you believe him. As sleep threatens, you cough again. It rattles, low and stubborn. You wipe your mouth. No blood this time. That's something. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Quiet, relentless, soft as a whisper, heavy as judgment. And inside, 2 men sleep under the same thin shield, pretending it's enough. Because tonight, a blanket is more than fabric. It's a prayer. You wake to bells and breath and the sour stink of damp bodies. The man beside you is gone. So is the half of the blanket you gave him. Not surprising, not cruel. It's just the rules, unspoken, understood. If it's not tied to your body or wedged beneath it, it's fair game. Especially now, when anything warm becomes currency. You sigh quietly and swing your legs off the cot. Your feet hit the icy floorboards and you wince. Pain, yes, but also confirmation you're still here. Outside, the snow has stopped falling, but the cold has sharpened. It's brittle now, biting and dry, with a sky stretched so thin and grey it looks like worn linen. You take a breath through your scarf and immediately regret it. The air slices your lungs. Your nose is bleeding again. Nothing dramatic, just a slow, constant trickle that starts up whenever the wind shifts. Today is Sunday, which means no assigned labour. The workhouse gives the illusion of rest, though no one's actually resting. You don't rest in winter, you conserve. You gather in the corners where the sun still finds its way through broken glass, trying to absorb something from the light, though it's weaker than ever. The younger ones whisper about church. Some of the older men are already on their way to the chapel down the road, walking with stiff backs and cracked shoes towards something that might resemble hope if you squint hard enough. You decide to go, not because you're particularly faithful, but because churches have thick walls and candles, and, if you're lucky, a stove burning somewhere near the altar. The walk is worse than usual. You're still sore from the coal hauling, and your foot, the one you thought might have recovered, has begun to swell. The toes are purple now. You try not to look, you try not to limp. People notice limping. Limping means weakness. Weakness attracts vultures. As you near the church, the bells toll again. A deep, hollow sound that rolls across the rooftops like thunder in a coffin. There's a line outside the doors. Everyone's waiting to get in, but no one talks. It's not reverence, it's exhaustion. Inside, the church is blessedly warm. Not hot. You'll never call anything hot again, but warmer than the street. You feel it in your face first, then your hands, then your lungs. You exhale and see the fog of your breath dissipate quicker than it has in days. The pews are full. You slide into one near the back, wedging yourself between an old woman wrapped in a curtain and a child with bruised knuckles and a scar across his cheek. The priest is already speaking when you sit down. You miss the beginning. You always do. Your ears are more attuned to footsteps and alarms than sermons these days. Still, his voice is calm, gentle even. He talks about endurance, about the fire within, about the Lord being present in times of hardship, about the frost testing the faithful. You let the words drift over you like steam from a bowl of broth. They don't nourish, but they offer a kind of comfort in their rhythm. You glance around. Some are praying, some are crying, some are just sleeping with their heads bowed, trying to steal a moment of warmth. No one gets judged here, at least not today. The church is one of the few places where desperation doesn't stick to you like a smell. Mid-sermon, the priest steps down and begins lighting candles along the front rail. One by one, golden flames flicker to life. You watch the light dance along the stained glass, transforming dull grey into flashes of red and blue. It's beautiful, and it hurts, because beauty like that feels like it belongs to a different world, one you left behind, or were never invited into. There's a moment, though, just one, when the child beside you reaches for your hand, not to hold it, just to rest his fingers there, like he needs to feel another pulse to remind himself he's not alone. You don't pull away. Somewhere near the altar, a man begins to cough violently. The kind of cough that doesn't stop. You tense immediately. Everyone does. It's a full-body sound, tearing and wet, echoing through the vaulted ceiling like a bell of its own. He stumbles out of the pew, pressing a rag to his mouth. Someone ushers him toward the side door. The service continues. It always does. There's a long-running debate among theologians, how much suffering is redemptive and how much is just suffering. Some say poverty cleanses the soul. Others say it's a human-made hell, dressed up in theology to make the privileged sleep better. You don't know the answer. All you know is that today, sitting in a borrowed pew beside a boy with no gloves, you'd like less character and more heat. After the final hymn, you stay behind, just a minute or two, to soak up the last of the warmth. The priest nods to you on his way out. You nod back. No words exchanged. Not because there's nothing to say, but because neither of you wants to admit how much has already been said in silence. You leave and head down the road toward nowhere in particular. There's no food waiting for you. No fire, no blanket. Just a cot and a corner and a wall that leaks wind when it breathes too hard. But for now, your fingers still move, your chest still rises and falls, and you still carry the faint memory of candlelight on the glass. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, though you are, but because walking slowly makes the day last longer. And when your life has been reduced to surviving daylight, you stretch it however you can. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls again, not for prayer, just for time. And time is all you have left to give. The thing about cold is that it doesn't just sit on your skin, it seeps in, slowly, creepingly. It curls up inside your marrow like a squat tenant refusing to pay rent. You've stopped noticing it in the obvious ways. Your fingertips, always numb. Your feet, that ache is so constant it has become part of your internal soundtrack. But it's the little things that remind you how deep it goes. Like how your words come out slower now, your tongue dragging in your mouth like it forgot how to move. Or how the tip of your nose has gone completely hard, not from frostbite, at least not yet, but from sheer dumb persistence. You're back in the workhouse yard today, tending the furnace with 3 others. The irony is rich. You're surrounded by firewood and flame, and yet you're still cold. Because the furnace isn't for you. It's for the bread ovens and the administrator's office. Your job is to shovel fuel and stoke the flame and keep the machinery of meagre charity running, while your own ribs show clearer every day. You feed the fire while you starve beside it. This is the part they don't write down in the ledgers. The flames are greedy. The furnace takes everything, wood, coal, peat, even scraps of old furniture, and asks for more. One of the other men reckoned that it's just like the city itself. Always needing, never giving. You laugh, but not too loud. You've learned to ration even that. Laughter burns breath, and breath carries warmth, and warmth is currency. You wipe sweat from your brow, real sweat for once. It gathers quickly and freezes quicker, crusting into salt along your hairline. One of the guards hands you a ladle of water. It tastes like rust and cold iron, but you drink it anyway. Hydration's rare, and your lips are cracked so badly you've started bleeding in your sleep. There's a quiet among furnace workers. Not because you're antisocial, but because the job takes what little air you've got. You communicate with glances, nods, grunts. One shovel for you, then the next man. Pass the tongs, rotate the coal. You learn each other's rhythms without speaking, like dancers who've grown too tired to argue about the music. Then the alarm rings. Not a siren exactly, but a bell on a crooked hook near the yard gate. Everyone pauses. No one knows what it's for. Fire, collapse, theft. The guard doesn't look concerned, which is somehow worse. He waves a hand toward the alley. You follow. That's when you see her. A woman, barefoot, slumped just outside the back fence. She's wrapped in what used to be a coat, now a bundle of rags and sorrow. Her legs are bare. Her feet are purple. One arm's cradling a child. The other is limp, trailing in the snow. She's breathing, but barely. The child is not. The guard mutters something under his breath and walks over. He squats beside her, checks her pulse, lifts the child gently. Then he stands and looks at you. Well, he says, don't just stand there. You're not sure what he means. Help. Witness. Ignore. Eventually, 2 of you carry her inside. The child, they say, is already gone. No need to move him. Someone will collect the body later. Just another name on the winter's list. Just another tragedy with no time for a funeral. You set the woman down near the furnace, not too close because sudden heat on frozen flesh is dangerous. You learned that early. Too quick a thaw can rupture skin, cause seizures. You've seen someone die from kindness that came too fast. Someone brings a blanket, you offer your water. The woman doesn't open her eyes, but her lips move. You think she's whispering a name, or maybe it's just a sound. She clutches the empty bundle of cloth tighter. For a moment, you imagine she doesn't realise the child is gone, or maybe she knows, and just needs to hold on to something. You sit beside her for a while, long after the others return to stoking. The guard doesn't tell you to move. He's seen this scene too many times to rush it. You think of your own mother. You can't picture her face anymore, not clearly. But you remember the way she wrapped your hands in scraps before sending you out in the snow. Said it wasn't much, but it was love, all the same. And that's what this woman's doing now, holding nothing like it's everything, trying to keep love from freezing. Some fringe scholars once argued that in times of famine or deep cold, human empathy declines, that scarcity shrinks compassion, that it becomes a burden people shed in favour of survival. You think about that now, you think of how many people stepped over this woman to get to the mission house, how many turned their eyes away so they wouldn't have to see what you're seeing. Maybe it's true, maybe empathy does shrink, but yours hasn't, at least not yet. You look at her again, still breathing, still clutching. You wrap your extra scarf around her legs and tuck the edges beneath her hips, creating a tiny cocoon. A useless gesture, maybe, but something about it feels necessary, like defying the cold, even if just symbolically. Eventually, one of the nurses comes and guides her away, somewhere quieter, somewhere warmer, maybe even somewhere merciful. You don't ask where, you don't want to know if the answer is nowhere. You return to the furnace, pick up your shovel, and keep feeding the flame. This time, though, you imagine it differently. The fire isn't just machinery anymore. It's protest, a refusal, a thing that pushes back against the cold, even if it only buys you minutes. As night falls, the wind picks up. Snow begins to drift through the broken gaps in the yard's fencing. The flames crackle. You watch them dance and wonder how many people will be lost tonight. How many are already lying somewhere beneath the snow, slowly vanishing. Then you imagine the woman. You imagine she's still alive, still holding, still warm. It's not much, but neither is a flame, until it isn't. There's a saying you heard once muttered by an old man wrapped in burlap near the docks. Cold don't kill you fast, it just convinces you to stop trying. At the time, you brushed it off as the kind of bleak poetry people adopt when they've got nothing left to lose. But now you understand it. It's not about frostbite or shivering to death under a staircase. It's about surrender, the quiet kind, the creeping kind, the kind where you just stop showing up. That's what today feels like. You're meant to report for ash duty again. Third day in a row. Normally you'd be relieved. It's indoors, at least partially, and comes with brief proximity to a furnace. But this morning your body doesn't want to rise. Your legs feel heavier than they should. Your breath comes short and shallow, and there's a sharpness in your side, like someone slid a blade between your ribs and left it there, just to make each inhale a test. You sit up anyway. The blanket is gone again, probably traded during the night. You're not even angry, you're just tired. The kind of tired that buries itself into your jaw, your spine, your thoughts. The floor is cold, your boots are stiff, you jam your feet into them and don't bother checking for blood today. If your toes are still attached, you'll know by sundown. If not, well, that solves the boot problem. You make it halfway to the assignment room before you stop. Just stop. In the middle of the hall, next to a cracked window and a rusted pipe that drips at its own lazy rhythm, your body sags against the wall. No one says anything. People pass you like they pass piles of snow, seen, but not acknowledged. You're part of the scenery now. A few minutes later, the head steward comes by, thin, angular, with eyes that never settle long enough to feel human. He glances at you once, scribbles something on a pad and walks on. That's it. That's the check-in. You don't exist unless they need to count you for rations or labour. You end up in the infirmary, not because you were told to go, but because it's warm and you've started coughing again. The wet kind, the kind with colour. You hack into your scarf and keep the rag pressed close so no one sees. The infirmary is a strange place, too quiet for comfort, too crowded for rest. Cots jammed together, some occupied, some not. The not ones always feel like promises, or warnings. You find a space near the back beside a woman whose skin is stretched so thin over her bones she looks like a paper lantern. Her eyes are open but unfocused, breathing but barely. A nurse checks on you once, young, distracted, kind in a mechanical way. She presses a hand to your forehead, frowns, then moves on. You're not sick enough yet. Not for treatment, not for concern. You're in the in-between zone, the grey area where they just watch and wait to see which way your body leans. You curl up on the cot and listen. There's a man across the aisle muttering to himself. Numbers mostly. You've seen him before. Used to be a bookkeeper, they say, before the factory burned down and took half his mind with it. He rocks slightly, knees pulled to his chest, whispering sums and figures into the stale air like they're spells. Someone else, further back, starts coughing hard. It doesn't stop. Sound like ripping cloth, then silence. The kind that turns heads. No one moves. Eventually the nurse returns, this time with another worker, and they cover the cot with a sheet. You don't see who it was. Doesn't matter. Just another gone too quiet. You close your eyes and try to rest. Dreams come, strangely vivid. You're walking through your childhood home, warm wood underfoot, smells of cooking onions and coal smoke. Your mother is humming. There's a stew on the stove. You look down and realise you're barefoot, but the floor is warm. It's always warm. You move through the rooms, touching furniture, seeing faces that blur when you try to name them. And then the window cracks, and the cold rushes in like a tidal wave, flooding the house, snapping there's warmth in two. You wake up gasping, clutching your chest. It's dark now. The nurse is gone. Most of the cots are still full. You swing your legs down and sit up slowly. Your muscles scream. Your lungs feel stitched together with thread. But you stand anyway. You don't want to die in the infirmary. You make your way back to the dormitories, weaving through shadowed corridors like a ghost retracing its own steps. By the time you reach your cot, someone else is in it. Of course, he's sleeping hard, mouth open, arms wrapped around himself like a prize. You think about shaking him. For a second, the anger rises. Then it fades. Instead, you find a corner near the stove and slide down against the wall. The heat barely reaches here, but it's better than the hallway. You pull your knees in, wrap your coat tighter, and cough again into your sleeve. This time, when you look, there's red. A bright, vibrant splash like a cherry pit on linen. You stare at it, then wipe it away. One of the other men nearby sees. His face doesn't change. He just nods slowly, then turns away. Everyone here recognizes the signs. Everyone here knows what comes next. You lean your head back against the wall and close your eyes. Somewhere outside the wind howls. Not like a wolf this time, just a long, low moan, like the city itself is exhaling, letting go. And you start to wonder, really wonder, what would happen if you didn't get up tomorrow? If you just stayed here, silent, still. Would anyone notice? Would they mark your name on the ledger, or just count the next warm body in your cot and keep moving? You'd like to think someone would remember you. But you know how things work. The cold doesn't leave tombstones, just silence. And maybe, if you're lucky, a name no one quite forgets. It takes longer than usual to stand up today. Your joints don't respond right away. They creak and resist like old hinges, stiff with rust. You press your palms into the floor and push, but your arms tremble under your own weight. There's a ringing in your ears that doesn't go away when you shake your head. Your breath sounds like someone dragging a shovel through gravel. But eventually, with enough effort and enough gritted teeth, you rise. You've passed the point where survival feels like something you do on purpose. It's more like momentum. Your body wakes because it remembers the motion, not because it wants to. You walk because walking is what happens after standing, even if every step feels like hauling bricks. You're moving, yes, but only because stillness feels too much like death. And you're not ready to let winter win quite yet. The cot thief is gone, took the blanket with him, left nothing behind but a faint smell of sweat and desperation. You sit on the wooden frame for a minute, catching your breath. Someone near the door coughs, wet and thick. You don't look to see who it is. Everyone sounds like that now, including you. Today's assignment is less about labour and more about attrition. They've decided to thin the ranks, not out of cruelty exactly, just necessity. The rooms are overcrowded, the food stores are low, and the administrators have noticed too many of you aren't productive anymore. That's the word they use, productive, like we're factory parts that stopped fitting. They bring a clipboard, they start calling names. Some are reassigned. Lighter work, shorter hours. A few are given passes to the mission house across town. You know what that means. Kicked out politely, given a place to sleep for one night, maybe two, before being dumped back onto the street. Winter exile by redirection. Then your name comes up. The man with the clipboard barely glances at you. Infirmary hold, he says. Pending review. It's not a death sentence, not officially, but you know what it means. They've seen the way you walk, the way you cough. They've probably noted the blood-stained handkerchief you didn't quite hide well enough. You're flagged now, tagged, marked for observation until you get better or stop being a problem, and no one gets better in winter. You're sent back to the infirmary. Same cot, same blanket, still damp from last time. The nurse this shift is older, less kind. She gives you a small cup of something that smells like vinegar and herbs, tells you to sip it slowly. You do. It burns going down, but at least it's warm. All around you, people are dying in slow motion. You can feel it in the rhythm of the room. There's a man 2 beds over who hasn't moved in 12 hours. His breath is shallow and slow. No one checks on him anymore. A woman in the corner keeps whispering prayers, not to herself, but to someone who isn't there. Her hands make motions in the air, tracing the outlines of people long gone. There's no real medicine here. Just hope and cloth and tinctures made from roots someone swore used to work on horses. You're not even sure what you're being treated for. The cough, maybe, the cold, the weight loss, the colour in your skin that keeps fading closer to parchment. The nurse changes your bandage without speaking. You didn't realise you had a bandage. You look down and see your ankles wrapped in cloth. It's seeping. You don't remember hurting it. Time moves differently in here. Hours stretch and fold like paper. One moment it's daylight, the next the shadows have returned, and the walls are humming with chill. You drift in and out. At some point you think someone visits, another worker, maybe a friend, but it could just be a dream. Their voice sounds like wind through a grate. You hear snippets of conversation from the nurses. More bodies last night. Need to clear out the back room. Orders came in from the parish office. You close your eyes and pretend you didn't hear any of it. One of the men in the bed beside you starts muttering in his sleep. He says a name, Sarah, over and over again, until it stops being a name and starts sounding like a broken hinge. You stare at the ceiling and wish for silence. But silence here isn't a blessing. It means someone stopped breathing. You cough again. This time there's more blood. Darker. You fold the handkerchief and tuck it into your coat. The nurse sees but doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. You begin thinking strange thoughts. About heat. About what it feels like to be warm. Not just not cold, but warm. You try to summon the memory of it. A hot bath, a cup of tea, and bourse. The heavy weight of 2 blankets instead of 1. Your mother's arms. The sun on your back in summer. But memory is thin. It evaporates before it can comfort. You try to sleep. You dream again. This time you're walking through snow barefoot, following footprints that lead nowhere. Each time you reach the end of a set, another appears in the distance. You keep going. You don't know why. There's no destination, just motion. You wake up shivering harder than before. Your breath fogs the air, even inside. Your hands have gone grey at the edges. Someone next to you has stopped breathing. You don't tell anyone. A historian once wrote that winter claimed more lives than war. Not in heroic ways, not on battlefields, but in these quiet, relentless rooms where men were allowed to fade rather than fall. There's no glory in it, no monument. Just a name forgotten by the morning. You wonder what your name will mean when you're gone, if anything. And then slowly you reach for your coat. You're not ready yet. You don't know why. Maybe it's instinct, maybe it's fear, maybe it's stubbornness. But you put your boots back on and you stand and you walk toward the light at the end of the infirmary hall. Because cold may be patient, but so are you. The hallway's too bright. Not in a cheerful way, not in a healing way. Just too white, too open, too silent. Like walking through the rib cage of a long-dead whale. Each window you pass is frosted over with the slow creep of ice from the inside, not the outside. A detail that feels more ominous than it should. Ice on the inside means the walls have given up. The cold isn't knocking anymore. It's moved in, unpacked, and started rearranging the furniture. You're limping harder than you did yesterday. Not that you're trying to, but the body doesn't lie. You're dragging your right foot slightly, Lily, like there's a weight tied to your ankle. The pain is less sharp now, more distant, but that's not a relief. Pain means feeling. Numbness means you're already losing pieces of yourself. You imagine your toes like tiny statues, white and brittle, cracking quietly with each step. You're not sure where you're going. You just keep walking, away from the infirmary, away from the staring faces and the whispers and the beds waiting for you to stop breathing. You pass a half-broken mirror in one of the halls and catch your reflection by accident. It stops you cold. You barely recognize yourself. The face is yours, sure, but hollowed out. Your cheeks are sunken, your eyes too wide, too distant, like they're peering through a window you forgot you closed. There's a thin smear of dried blood near the corner of your mouth. Your lips are blue. The collar of your coat is stained with sweat and something darker. You look like you've been dug out of the ground. You step away from the mirror. You find yourself outside eventually. Don't ask how. Just 1 minute you're inside and the next, the door is swinging shut behind you with that heavy final sound. The kind of sound that implies no one's coming to check where you've gone. The cold hits you like a truth you already knew but didn't want confirmed. The sky's clear now, that pale, dangerous blue that always means the cold is worse than it looks. No clouds, no softness, just hard light and hard air and harder ground. The snow has crusted into a thin sheet of ice that crackles underfoot. You hear the sound and think of bones. There's nowhere to go, but you walk anyway. Down the alley, past the locked bakery with its boarded-up windows, past the broken water pump where someone froze solid last winter, still clutching the handle. Past the line at the mission house, longer than usual today. More faces you recognise, all wearing the same expression, hope, tempered with the exhaustion of knowing better. You don't stop there, you keep going, because there's a part of you, quiet but stubborn, that wants to find something real, something warm, something alive, something that proves this winter hasn't buried everything just yet. Eventually your feet take you to the river, or what used to be the river. Now it's a stretch of frozen grey, silent and flat, with little patches where people have chipped holes into the ice to fish. There are bodies out there. Not bodies, not yet, but people hunched over the holes in the ice, bundled in so many layers they look like sacks of laundry. You watch them, wonder what they're catching, wonder if it's worth it. There's a fire barrel nearby, burned black down the sides. A couple of men are standing around it, warming their hands. You step closer, they make room, no words, just a nod. That's how it works here. You stretch your fingers toward the heat. The sensation is nearly unbearable, sharp needling pain as the blood rushes back in. You grit your teeth and let it happen. The fire smells like burned paper and oil. One man tosses in a piece of wood he probably scavenged from a collapsed door frame. It hisses as it burns. Someone offers you a scrap of bread. You hesitate, then take it. It's stale and tastes like ash. You eat it anyway. One of the men tells a story, quietly, almost reverently, about a woman who gave birth last week in a supply shed near the stables. No doctor, no midwife, no heat. The child lived. The mother didn't. The baby's with someone now, wrapped in rags, being passed around like a coal ember. No one strong enough to keep it, but no one willing to let it go out. You don't know why, but this sticks with you. The image of a newborn cradled in layers of old fabric, carried from hand to hand like a secret. You imagine the heat of that tiny body, too small to warm itself, relying on the kindness of arms already too tired to hold more weight. You close your eyes and picture it, somewhere out there, breathing, surviving. It makes you cry, quietly, just a little. You blink and wipe your cheek before the tears can freeze. The fire is dying. The men start to leave, one by one. They nod again, the way men do when words are too expensive. You nod back. Eventually you're alone beside the glowing coals. You stare into them for a long time, and then you take off your coat. Not to die, to give it away. You walk back toward the mission house, passing the line of people who look just like you. Some worse, some better. Near the front there's a boy, 12 maybe. Coat made of newspaper, tied with string, hands raw and red. He sees you coming, flinches slightly. You take off the coat and hold it out. He stares. So do a few others. Then slowly he takes it, says nothing, just slips into it like someone being lowered into a bath. His eyes never leave yours. You nod, you turn and walk away, back toward the workhouse, back toward the cot, back toward the cold that never left. But now there's one person just a little warmer. You cough again as you walk. It's deeper now. Your legs buckle once, just for a second, and then steady. You smile, not because you're saved, but because for the first time in weeks, you did something that mattered. You're not dead yet, and that counts for something.